In the first half of the 20th century, China, with a population of over 400 million people, fell under the almost absolute domination of four families: Chiang, Song, Kung, and Chen. They forged a colossal ruling apparatus. That apparatus manipulated the nation's military, finance, politics, and diplomacy. The standing of this alliance was so formidable that it seemed utterly invincible. Yet by 1949, this entire edifice of power abruptly fractured and collapsed completely. The downfall of the four families did not merely bring an end to an era. It was a historic turning point that laid the foundations for modern China and contemporary Taiwan. The 21st century geopolitical map that we see today was, in truth, shaped by that historic flight of 1949. What really happened? What underlying causes brought down such a titanic power block? Today's video will uncover every hidden corner behind the rise and fall of the most formidable power alliance of the 20th century in China. This will be the most detailed, authentic, and profound story you have ever watched about a turbulent modern China. Part 1. The chaotic historical context of the Republic of China in the early 20th century. To understand how four families, Chiang, Song, Kung, and Chen, could hold an entire nation of 400 million people in the palm of their hands, we are compelled to turn back the clock to the early years of the 20th century. Imagine the whole of Europe suddenly losing its central government. No law, no shared currency, no national army. Instead, dozens of generals commanding tens of thousands of troops, declaring themselves kings over every avenue and every city. That was precisely what happened to China in the early 20th century. In the autumn of 1911, the Shanghai Revolution overthrew the Qing dynasty, the final feudal empire that had ruled China for nearly 300 years. For the first time in thousands of years, the Chinese people heard the concept of a republic. But freedom and peace did not knock on the door so easily. The collapse of the Qing dynasty brought no reconstruction. Instead, it left behind a colossal power vacuum. In 1916, when Yuan Shikai, who had unsuccessfully attempted to restore the monarchy, drew his last breath, the sole shackle keeping China from being torn apart officially snapped as well. China no longer possessed a central government with real power. Beijing at the time was merely an empty shell. The throne was vacant, yet the local seats of power burned with artillery fire. The country officially entered the darkest era of its modern history, the warlord era. China was carved up into dozens of separate mini-states. In the north, major warlord cliques like the Fengtian clique under Jiang Zuolin, the Zhili clique under Cao Kun and Wu Peifu, and the Anhui clique under Duan Qirui, took turns playing the game of coups. Today, this general entered Beijing to claim dominance. Tomorrow, another general led tens of thousands of troops to smash the courts and drive the government away. Major warlord cliques fought one another continuously for control over Beijing. Why Beijing? Because whoever held Beijing would be recognized by Western powers as the legitimate Beiyang government, gaining the authority to sign treaties and borrow money. For over a decade, China was no different from the American Wild West, but on a scale thousands of times greater. What was the nature of these warlords? They possessed no political ideals, nor were they revolutionaries. They held only two things: guns and money. To feed their war machines, They squeezed the people dry through absurd taxes, road taxes, market taxes, head taxes. Indeed, in certain provinces, warlords even forced citizens to pay up front the land taxes for 60 years into the future. There was no law, there was no central bank, and no unified currency. Every general printed his own paper money to pay his troops. Today, that stack of bills could buy a sack of rice. Tomorrow, if that general was shot dead by a rival, the stack instantly turned into trash. The warlords cared nothing for the lives of the people, plunging the populace into absolute misery and hardship. If the whole of China was a battlefield, then the golden chest that every warlord lusted after was the Jiangnan region. Jiangnan is the historical name for the fertile, prosperous lower reaches of the Yangtze River. Its heartland comprised the two wealthiest provinces of that era, Jiangsu and Zhejiang, alongside the global financial hub of the time, Shanghai. On administrative maps, Shanghai was situated right within the borders of Jiangsu province. Shanghai was likened to the New York or London of East Asia, hosting the largest private banks, the textile industry, and the busiest commercial ports. It was precisely that colossal flow of money that turned Jiangnan into a ferocious battlefield, fought over by major warlord cliques. Yet China's tragedy did not stop at internal devastation. Looking upon the twitching corpse of China, Western powers and Japan were like hawks waiting to feast on the flesh. Through a system of unequal treaties and independent zones of special privilege known as concessions, foreign powers turned China into their own backyard. Japan stood behind the scenes, funding weapons and currency for the Fengtian clique in the northeast. Britain and the United States backed the Zhili clique. The foreign powers had no desire to see a unified China. A unified and powerful China was a threat, but a chaotic, fragmented China, where warlords continuously borrowed money to buy their weapons, was the most lucrative market of all. Shanghai, the financial capital of Asia at the time, was carved up into the international settlement and the French concession. Put simply, concessions were pieces of land sitting directly on Chinese soil, yet the Chinese government or military had absolutely no right to intervene or collect taxes, thanks to the special privilege known as extraterritoriality. Foreign forces turned Shanghai into a nation within a nation, tearing it into three distinct pieces. An international settlement, originally merged from the British and American concessions, jointly administered by an Anglo-American alliance with Britain holding main dominance, boasting the majestic Bund, towering banks, and stock exchanges, an independent French concession shaded by plane trees, serving both as a luxurious residential area for plutocrats with European-style villas and as an underworld sanctuary housing casinos, opium dens, and the Green Gang stronghold of mob boss Du Yuesheng, while the remainder was the impoverished native Chinese area, laid bare beneath the brutal slaughters of the warlord cliques. Inside the concessions lay glamorous lights, majestic banks, and warm dinner parties of foreign capitalists. Outside the concessions lay the corpses of landless peasants and the roaring gunfire of war between the Jiangnan warlords. In 1924, the Jiangsu-Zhejiang War erupted right at the gateway to Shanghai. General Xie Yuan of the Zhili clique clashed with Liu Yongxiang of the Anhui clique. Liu Yongxiang dispatched his army across the border from Zhejiang province, intent on seizing Shanghai, purely to corner the colossal revenue from port taxes and opium. General Xie Yuan, ruler of Jiangsu province, could not sit idly by and watch the precious jewel on his own home turf be snatched away by others, since Shanghai lay right within the heart of Jiangsu province. The two warlord cliques plunged into a vicious struggle to tear Shanghai apart. Artillery and gunfire plowed through the suburban areas, reducing peaceful villages to ash. Tens of thousands of panicked civilians fled, flooding through iron gates to seek refuge inside the foreign concessions. In the end, Liu Yongshang's was defeated, yet peace did not return in the slightest. After war laid waste to both Jiangsu and Zhejiang, two old warlords were left utterly exhausted. Spotting a golden opportunity, a young and ambitious general named Sun Chuanfang instantly stepped forward to seize the moment. Though nominally belonging to the same Zhili clique as Qi Shiyuan, in the warlord world there were no permanent allies, only permanent interests. Sun Chuanfang ruthlessly brushed his former allies aside, taking sole possession of the entire Jiangnan region. Declaring himself commander-in-chief, he established a massive warlord alliance ruling over the 5 wealthiest southeastern provinces, including Jiangsu, Jiang, Anhui, Jiangxi, and Fujian, with its capital in Nanjing. Sun Chuanfang became a true lord of Jiangnan. He maintained a terrifyingly expensive war machine of over 200,000 troops, and turned Shanghai into his private cash cow, pointing guns at the Shanghai Plutocrats to extract every last penny to feed his army. Standing at the very center of that geopolitical storm, the Shanghai Plutocrats, comprising major private banks, textile mill owners, and wealthy merchant guilds, bore the brunt of the devastation as they were transformed into a cash cow, extorted by brute force. Warlords like Qi Shiyuan or Sun Chuanfang possessed no economic management mindset whatsoever, operating purely under the bandits' law. Whenever they needed money to prepare for war, they pointed guns at the heads of executives at major private banks, forcing them to buy stacks of military bonds that were never repaid or squeezing them dry through forced loans, while simultaneously erecting countless warlord checkpoints to stack tax upon tax, such as the absurd Likin tax levied on goods moving from Zhejiang into Shanghai, completely choking domestic industry. The chaos of the warlord wars made the Shanghai Plutocrats realize that their wealth and lives were not protected by any law. They were forced to shift their capital and families inside the international settlement, where British, American, and French troops were stationed to seek refuge. This deepened the dependence of Shanghai's economy on Western imperial powers, while transforming the concession into a financial oasis beyond the reach of the warlords. The Shanghai Plutocrats grew exhausted with having to continuously change masters and pay tribute to warlords devoid of political vision. They fostered a vital longing. They yearned for a central government, strong and civilized enough to sweep away the warlord chaos, unify the currency, abolish the absurd tax system, and protect private property rights. A new order that they would later come to believe could only be found in Chiang Kai-shek. Part 2. The Rise of the Kuomintang and Chiang Kai-shek. While the north and the Jiangnan region sank into the ashes of warlord warfare, down in the southern lands, in the port city of Guangzhou, another revolutionary flame was catching fire. That was the base of the Kuomintang, led by Dr. Sun Yat-sen, developed from the Tongmenghui, the underground organization that had sparked the Xinhai Revolution to overthrow the Qing dynasty in 1911. The Kuomintang carried the mission of renewing the country under the 3 principles of the people: nationalism, democracy, and livelihood. The Kuomintang's ideal was to expel foreign invaders, sweep away the warlords, and bring food and clothing to the people. In 1917, refusing to recognize the puppet government in Beijing, Sun Yat-sen established the Nationalist Government in Guangzhou, harboring the ambition to build an army to march north on the northern expedition to unify the country. Guangzhou was the central city of Guangdong province in southern China. For over a decade following the Shanghai Revolution, Sun Yat-sen was forced to bitterly admit a harsh reality. No matter how noble an ideal might be, it became meaningless without its own military apparatus to defend it. Previously, the Kuomintang had always been forced to borrow troops or form temporary alliances with local minor warlords. But every single time, upon victory, the warlords turned their guns around and drove Sun Yat-sen away. Drawing a lesson of blood, Sun Yat-sen understood to sweep away the warlords and to launch the northern expedition to unify the nation, the party was compelled to forge a revolutionary army of its very own. But where were they to find the money and the weapons to build an army? When he knocked on the doors of Western powers like Britain and the United States and was turned away, Sun Yat-sen found an outstretched hand reaching down from the north, the Soviet Union. In 1923, the Soviet Union agreed to provide financial aid, weapons, and seasoned military advisors to assist the Kuomintang. In return, the Soviets laid down a non-negotiable condition. The Kuomintang had to form an alliance with the Chinese Communist Party, a young revolutionary party founded in 1921. This event is known in history as the First United Front. Communist Party members, including names that would later enter history, such as Zhou Enlai or Mao Zedong, were permitted to join the Kuomintang as individuals. They brought to the Kuomintang something the old warlords lacked entirely: the ability to conduct ideological work, mobilize the masses, and organize worker and peasant movements. It was precisely this force that created a solid rear guard and widespread public support for the subsequent northern expedition. To give concrete form to this alliance, in 1924, Sun Yat-sen established the Whampoa Military Academy, an institution tasked with training commanding officers and the core military strength for the revolution. And the man chosen by Sun Yat-sen to serve as its first commandant was a 37-year-old officer who had just returned from a military study tour in Moscow. Chiang Kai-shek. Chiang was born into a salt merchant family in Zhejiang province. Having lost his father at the age of 8, Chiang grew up under the strict discipline of his mother and the scrutinizing eyes of his relatives. The young man from the Chiang family forged early on a resilient, guarded, and fiercely ambitious character. Realizing that only the barrel of a gun could change one's fate in chaotic times, Chiang went to Japan to study military science. It was in Tokyo that Chiang joined the Tongmenghui and met Sun Yat-sen. If Sun Yat-sen was an idealistic philosopher with the soul of a scholar, Chiang Kai-shek was precisely the pragmatic enforcer that Sun Yat-sen lacked. Chiang was ready to accept the most dangerous assignments, from assassinating political rivals to organizing underground armed forces. Chiang quickly became a trusted disciple, the living shield in whom Sun Yat-sen placed absolute trust. The Whampoa Military Academy was a peculiar yet remarkably effective fusion. Chiang Kai-shek served as commandant, holding military management power. Zhou Enlai, of the Communist Party, held the post of director of the political department, taking charge of the revolutionary ideological education of the cadets. Money and weapons, funded directly by the Soviet Union. Cadets, thousands of passionate young intellectuals and youths flocking from every corner of the country, joining out of the ideal of national liberation. Training model: combining Western-style iron discipline, modern combat techniques, and progressive political education. For Chiang Kai-shek, Whampoa was a goldmine of power. In traditional Chinese culture, the bond between master, teacher, and disciple-student was sacred. Chiang Kai-shek made full use of his role as commandant to turn the cadets into aides fiercely and personally loyal to him, rather than to the state or an ideology. Whampoa generals addressed Chiang respectfully as commandant throughout their entire lives. The seat of commandant elevated Chiang Kai-shek from a mid-level party figure into the master and spiritual father of thousands of young officers, cadets from the early classes, such as Hu Zongnan, Chen Cheng, and Du Yuming, rapidly formed the command framework of the National Revolutionary Army (NRA), constituting the most powerful military faction within the Kuomintang, known as the Whampoa clique. In March 1925, while striving to negotiate peace in the north, Dr. Sun Yat-sen passed away from illness in Beijing. As he laid down his life, the negotiation table slammed shut, and the dream of unifying China through peaceful means officially shattered. His departure left behind a colossal power vacuum in Guangzhou, supported by the strictly loyal Whampoa clique officer network he personally trained. Chiang Kai-shek swiftly outmaneuvered his political rivals to gain total command of the Kuomintang military. While fatal cracks were already appearing within the First United Front, both the nationalists and the communists still faced an immediate common enemy: the brutal warlords of the North. In July 1926, Chiang Kai-shek officially issued the order for the Northern Expedition, marching troops out of Guangzhou toward the north, sparking a fierce showdown with the warlord cliques. The objective of the Northern Expedition was monumental. The nationalist government in the south needed to destroy the most formidable warlord cliques tearing China apart in order to unify the nation. These were Wu Peifu, who controlled the strategically vital central region; Sun Quanfang, who dominated the wealthy Jiangnan region; Jiang Zuolin, the pinnacle of power in the north, the northeast warlord who had just seized the capital of Beijing. Holding the seat of the Beiyang government, marching tens of thousands of troops out of Guangzhou to the north was a terrifying economic challenge. Wages, ammunition, provisions, medical equipment, all demanded hard cash. Soviet aid was limited and carried strict political conditions. Guns and bullets alone were not enough. Chiang Kai-shek was compelled to find a wallet large enough to feed his war machine. And the man holding the key to that treasury was none other than Sung Che-ven, the brilliant financial pillar of the Sung family. But who was Sung Che-ven? Why did the young General Chiang Kai-shek place his absolute trust in this man, to entrust him with the finances of an entire revolution? To answer that question, we must turn back the clock to look at Sung Se-ven's extraordinary father, the patriarch behind the Sung family. Charlie Sung, Sung Yaoru. Part 3. The Sung family. From Stowaway to the Shanghai Power Network. Charlie Sung, Sung Yaoru, born in 1863, died in 1918, is considered the man behind the whole of modern Chinese history. He did not serve directly as president or minister, but through money, vision, and 6 extraordinary children, he laid the foundations for the entire 4 great families' empire and shaped the destiny of China throughout the first half of the 20th century. Sung Yaoru's real name was Han Jiajun, born into a poor farming family processing coconuts on Hainan Island. At 12 years old, he was adopted by a maternal uncle surnamed Sung in Boston, America, to learn the silk and tea trade. Unable to bear the stifling life at the shop, the young boy Han Jiajun ran away, stowing away on a U.S. revenue cutter patrol ship. The ship's captain, Charles Jones, a benevolent Methodist Christian, took the boy under his protection. He was baptized, taking the new name Charles Jones Sung Yaoru, to express gratitude to the captain. Supported by the American Methodist community, Sung Yaoru studied theology at Vanderbilt University in Tennessee and became an official Methodist minister in 1885. In 1886, Sung Yaoru returned to Shanghai to preach, but he quickly realized, to change an impoverished country, praying alone was not enough. There had to be economics and knowledge. He left the church to enter the Shanghai business realm, opening noodle factories, trading in tobacco and silk, and, crucially, founding the very first Bible printing press in Shanghai, Sino-American Press. Printing Bibles brought him colossal profits, turning him into one of the very first self-made millionaires in the Shanghai concessions. However, behind the Bible pages, he secretly used the printing presses to publish revolutionary leaflets and anti-king materials. Throughout 30 years of living in the concessions, Sung Yaoru not only accumulated a vast fortune through his Bible printing press, but also established a hugely formidable upper-class social network. He married Ni Kuei-tsing, who came from an illustrious family line. Ni Kuei-tsing was a descendant of the high official Xu Guangqi, a top-tier scholar and intellectual from a noble family in Ming Dynasty Shanghai. Thanks to this, the Sung family gained a social status belonging to the highest tier of intellectuals and noble capitalists in Shanghai. In 1894, Sung Yaoru met Sun Yat-sen. The two men quickly became soulmates, sharing the same ideal of overthrowing the feudal Qing court and establishing a republican regime. Throughout over 20 years of Sun Yat-sen wandering in exile across the world, Sung Yaoru acted as the wallet backing Sun Yat-sen. He poured his entire fortune into purchasing weapons, maintaining armies, and funding the failed uprisings of Sun Yat-sen's Tongmenghui. Sung Yaoru, alongside Yu Shaqing, served as founding members and core sponsors of the Shanghai Young Men's Christian Association, Shanghai YMCA. This was the very exclusive club, gathering the entirety of the financial and industrial elite of eastern China. Yu Shaqing was a shipping magnate, president of the Shanghai Chamber of Commerce, and the supreme leader of the Ningbo Jiangnan plutocratic faction. They were close friends, soulmates in the Methodist faith, business allies, and joined forces behind the scenes to secretly fund the 1911 Shanghai Revolution. Thanks to his extensive prestige among merchants in the Shanghai concessions and the Chinese-American diaspora, Sung Yaoru stepped forward to campaign for millions of US dollars in donations for the 1911 Shanghai Revolution, overthrowing the Qing dynasty. In the eyes of the Shanghai plutocrats, Sung Yaoru was not merely a self-made millionaire, but a symbol of prestige and financial resources standing behind the birth of the Republican era. Yet Sung Yaoru's greatest legacy lay in an educational vision far ahead of its time. Amidst a feudal Chinese society heavily burdened by the mindset of favoring men over women, Sung Yaoru made a shocking decision, sending all three of his daughters to study in America when they were merely 10 to 12 years old. He wanted his children to be not just high society ladies, but masters of the nation's destiny. And his children became the very engine shaping the entirety of modern Chinese history. The three Sung sisters. Sung Ai-ling was the elder sister, marrying banking magnate Kung-Soong Shi, becoming the economic brain, cornering the entire Republican financial sector. Sung Ching-ling was the second daughter. marrying Sun Yat-sen, becoming the mother of modern China. Sung Mei-ling was the youngest daughter, marrying Chiang Kai-shek, becoming the First Lady of the Republic and a symbol of diplomacy with the West. His three sons, Sung Si-ven, Sung Si-liang, and Sung Si-an, were all brilliant technocrats heading the nation's largest state-owned enterprises and banks. A famous, enduring Chinese folk saying later emerged about the three Sung sisters. One loved money, Ai-ling, one loved her country, Ching-ling, and one loved power, Mei-ling. In 1918, Song Yaoru passed away. But that father left behind a rock-solid family launchpad, ready to elevate his second child, Song Si-ven. The greatest difference between Song Si-ven and most Chinese politicians of that era began right from his living environment. From a young age, Song Si-ven grew up right inside the Shanghai concessions, a place considered a miniature Europe in the heart of Asia. Raised in a Methodist family and deeply influenced by Western style, he spoke fluent English like a native language and grew familiar with a modern lifestyle and mindset from early childhood. Yet to truly master the economy of a nation, experiences in the Shanghai concessions were not enough. Song Si-ven needed to step into the center of the modern capitalist world to forge himself. In 1912, the young Song Si-ven set foot in America, embarking on an academic journey among the most formidable in the history of Chinese politicians at the time. In 1915, at Harvard University, at the age of 21, he graduated with a distinction, holding a bachelor's degree in economics. At this most prestigious institution in the world, Song Si-ven not only absorbed the most advanced Western macroeconomic theories, but also built a broad network of relationships with American intellectuals and the financial elite. Not stopping at his bachelor's degree, he continued to immerse himself in advanced research, successfully defending his doctoral thesis in economics, equipping himself with the sharpest weapons in public finance and modern banking systems. Outstanding academic achievements were merely the launchpad. Song Si-ven decided to plunge directly into the crucible of the global economy. Wall Street. He became one of the exceedingly rare Chinese individuals at the time to be accepted to work at National City Bank of New York, Citibank. Here, he gained direct exposure to international commercial banking operations, credit mechanism, bond issuance, and the management methods of massive capital flows. Not confining himself to America, Song Si-ven also returned to stir up the Asian market, participating directly in operations and trading at the Shanghai Stock Exchange. In 1923, accepting the invitation of his brother-in-law Sun Yat-sen, the 29-year-old intellectual left Shanghai to step straight into the crucible of Guangzhou. When Song Si-ven set foot in the south, the so-called revolutionary government was actually standing on the brink of bankruptcy. The treasury was empty, the army was starving, salary arrears were piling up, and paper currency issued by local authorities turned into waste paper just days later. Finance at the time was an inescapable mess, squiked by three existential crisis milestones. First was the domination of foreign banks. The entire financial lifeline of the South at the time was manipulated by major British and French banks situated in the Shamian concession right adjacent to Guangzhou, along with other major international banks. They were ready to squeeze prices, refuse loans to the revolutionary government, or exploit instability to turn a profit on the backs of the people. Sun Yat-sen's government possessed absolutely no monetary tools in its hands to regulate the economy. Second was the junk money disaster of the warlords. To pay for war, The previous local authorities and warlord generals continuously printed paper money indiscriminately, without any backing of gold or foreign currency. The consequence was runaway inflation. With paper money losing value by the hour, citizens had to carry entire sacks of money to the market just to buy a bunch of vegetables, leaving southern commerce exhausted and public confidence hitting rock bottom. Third was the drain caused by the intermediary tax system. Tax revenue collected from the people, instead of flowing into the state treasury, was pocketed through a dark tax farming system run by corrupt officials and local underworld forces. Whenever the revolutionary government wanted to purchase a few shipments of weapons or pay soldiers' wages, it always had to beg or borrow at exorbitant interest rates. Seeing clearly through that bankruptcy trap, Sun Yat-sen was forced to give birth to a central bank of his own. In 1924, despite countless difficulties, Sun Yat-sen made up his mind to establish the Central Bank of Guangzhou, the supreme power tool to monopolize currency issuance, while simultaneously assuming the function of the state treasury to re-establish fiscal discipline and lay the foundations for a modern state. And to operate this life-saving machine, he handed the governor's seat entirely to his brother-in-law, Sung Seven. By 1925, Sung Seven was further appointed to serve concurrently as Minister of Finance, without resorting to political slogans. Sung Seven created a sensational technocratic revolution. First, he ruthlessly abolished the corrupt intermediary tax farming system of old officials and local forces, compelling all revenue from salt, tobacco, alcohol, and trade taxes to be deposited directly into the central treasury. Alongside this, for the very first time in Chinese administrative history, he brought double-entry bookkeeping and public auditing mechanisms into operation, making every single coin collected or spent completely transparent. Not stopping there, backed by Sun Yat-sen, he also revived the national currency by issuing a new currency backed by gold and foreign exchange, thereby sweeping away the warlords' junk money completely and restoring the confidence of southern merchants. The results of that grand overhaul exceeded all imagination. The revenue of the Guangzhou government skyrocketed over tenfold in just 2 years. The transparent, abundant, and standardized financial flow established by Song Cheven under the patronage of Sun Yat-sen provided a stable budget for Chiang Kai-shek's National Revolutionary Army. Part 4. The Northern Expedition and the historic handshake between Chiang Kai-shek and the Shanghai Plutocrats. When the military machine possessed sufficient strength, in the summer of 1926, Chiang Kai-shek officially issued the order for the Northern Expedition, with the core force being the Whampoa clique, staunch young officers carrying a modern military mindset. Chiang Kai-shek threw all his strength into crushing the Hunan and Hubei battle lines. After blood-soaked decisive battles, taking down the Wuhan fortress, Chiang completely wiped out Wu Peifu's warlord clique in the central region. Chiang's next target was Sun Quanfang, the warlord overlord dominating the prosperous Jiangnan region. When Chiang Kai-shek moved to strike Sun Quanfang, Chiang could not launch a direct assault straight into Shanghai and Jiangsu, but was forced to attack inward from the southern and western fringes of the Jiangnan region, meaning capturing Jiangxi and Fujian first, before sweeping across Zhejiang to close in on Shanghai and Nanjing, the heart of Jiangnan. In less than half a year, from a narrow base in the south, the territory controlled by Chiang Kai-shek expanded tenfold across 5 provinces: Hunan, Hubei, Jiangxi, Fujian, and Zhejiang. Yet, right upon that momentum of brilliant victory, a ruthless trap appeared before his eyes. The more victories won, the more the military apparatus swelled. Regular troops on the front line grew increasingly scarce, but the total headcount requiring salaries in the rear exploded out of control. Why did this paradox exist? First was the expanding territory. Having seized a landmass 10 times larger across 5 southern provinces, Chiang could not leave the rear vacant. To hold cities, guard bridges, protect railway lines, and collect taxes in newly liberated zones, Chiang was forced to partition off a portion of elite Whampoa officers to remain as command cadres, then massively recruit local conscripts on the spot to set up regional garrison units. Second were battlefield casualties. Blood-soaked decisive battles, such as those at Wuhan or Niangziguan, severely eroded the Whampoa regular forces. To maintain offensive momentum toward Shanghai, Chiang had to continuously recruit replacements into the main force units. And third, the most ruthless core was the buying off and integration of surrendering troops. Facing the Beiyang warlord cliques, boasting up to 800,000 troops, Chiang Kai-shek understood all too well that pure strength could not swallow the enemy whole. Chiang proactively dispatched envoys carrying cash, official ranks, and promises of preserving local power to bribe minor warlord generals. Conversely, on the warlord's side, they viewed the army as their sole private property to retain their seats. Seeing major warlords like Wu Peifu or Sun Chuanfeng collapsing in rapid succession, subordinate generals and tens of thousands of defeated warlord troops proactively surrendered to Chiang Kai-shek to preserve their forces. Chiang could not disarm and send them home, for fear they would turn to banditry or shoot him in the back. He integrated them intact into the National Revolutionary Army and paid their wages. Thus, to maintain regular forces continuing toward Shanghai, Chiang was compelled to shoulder a total headcount exploding to between 300,000 and 400,000 men, swelling 3 to 4 times the original army that had left Guangzhou to launch the northern expedition. This expansion of military expenditure plunged Chiang Kai-shek straight into the very expansion trap that the ancient Roman Empire had stumbled into nearly 1700 years earlier. When the Roman Empire expanded across the Mediterranean, a border thousands of kilometers long forced them to partition off garrison troops everywhere. To hold territories, Roman emperors were also compelled to induce the surrender of and pay wages to tens of thousands of barbarian warriors. The result was that the military budget consumed 80% of the imperial treasury. To feed that swelling machine, Rome chose the solution of debasing the silver denarius coin, plunging the entire Mediterranean into a catastrophe of hyperinflation and collapse. Chiang Kai-shek saw the lesson of Rome unfolding right before his eyes. Song Che-ven was at that time the very man holding the purse strings, striving to collect every single coin of tax in Guangdong province to send to the front line for Chiang Kai-shek. However, the tax revenue of a single small province like Guangdong could not feed an army swelling to hundreds of thousands of men as the war spread. Chiang Kai-shek understood that if he failed to find a colossal wallet immediately, this military machine would revolt on its own and crush him. And the sole wallet capable of rescuing Chiang at this moment lay right on the other side of the Shanghai concession wall, the most bustling financial center in East Asia. Song Che-ven saw the opportunity. If Chiang Kai-shek captured Shanghai and joined hands with the Plutocrats there, the nationalist government would possess infinite financial resources to crush the Beijing government. The Shanghai Plutocrats were also sitting on pins and needles at that time. For many years, they had been forced to live under the rule of warlord Sun Quanfang. To sustain the war against rivals, the warlord administration continuously raised taxes, imposed mandatory donations, and forced banks, businesses to purchase government bonds or grant compulsory loans. Prolonged war caused trade to stagnate, hindered the flow of goods, and rendered the business environment increasingly unstable. Yet that was only half of the predicament facing the Shanghai Plutocrats. Ever since the Kuomintang and the Communist Party formed the First United Front, the labor movement in Shanghai had exploded. Under the organization of labor unions led by the Communist Party, hundreds of thousands of workers in textile mills, docks, railways, and power plants continuously launched general strikes, demanding wage increases, shorter working hours, and recognition of trade union rights. As the Northern Expedition Army closed in on Shanghai in early 1927, this movement shifted from economic struggle to political struggle. Under the direction of Zhou Enlai, worker forces launched 3 consecutive uprisings aimed at overthrowing the warlord administration in the city. The first 2 uprisings were suppressed, but by the third uprising on the 21st and 22nd of March 1927, tens of thousands of armed workers coordinated with union forces to launch a city-wide general strike, seizing control of numerous police stations, armories, telegraph stations, and administrative agencies, leaving Sun Quanfang's ruling apparatus nearly paralyzed. For bank owners, industrialists, and wealthy capitalist families, this was an extremely alarming signal. They did not merely see a movement demanding wage increases. They saw a worker force becoming increasingly tightly organized by the Communist Party and bearing arms. Barely 10 years earlier, the October Revolution in Russia had overthrown the old regime, nationalized banks, confiscated numerous private enterprises, and abolished the property rights of the capitalist class. The Shanghai Plutocrats feared that if the Chinese Communist Party continued to expand its influence and gain power, then the factories, banks, and massive wealth they had built over generations might suffer a similar fate. Therefore, they needed a force powerful enough to sweep away the warlords, extinguish the labor strikes, and, most importantly, protect their private property. The Shanghai Plutocrats decided to forge a historic political alliance with Chiang Kai-shek. Yet to fully grasp this historic turning point, we must look at the intensely brutal internal political chessboard of that time. Following the passing of Chairman Sun Yat-sen in 1925, the struggle for supreme power within the Kuomintang between Wang Jingwei and Chiang Kai-shek raged with absolute ferocity. Inheriting Sun Yat-sen's legacy, Wang Jingwei, Sun Yat-sen's close disciple, secured initial victory, rising to the presidency of the Nationalizing Government, heading the entire executive apparatus and standing as the highest legitimate civilian leader of the party. Chiang Kai-shek, meanwhile, served as commander-in-chief of the National Revolutionary Army, wielding absolute military power. When the Northern Expedition made massive strides and captured the middle reaches of the Yangtze River, in December 1926, the revolutionary government decided to relocate the political center and capital from Guangzhou to Wuhan. Wuhan sat at a vital crossroads between inland economic flows and transport arteries, providing a perfect political springboard to control the entire nation rather than remaining stationed in the distant south. At this new center of power, Wang Jingwei consolidated his civilian status by creating strong operational space for progressive forces and worker organizations. so that when the armed uprising directed by Zhou Enlai erupted in Shanghai, his Wuhan government immediately sided with this force and openly granted them absolute backing. This was precisely a red line that caused the plutocrats and major banks to urgently realize that their colossal fortunes were directly threatened by Wang Jingwei's line, forcing them to seek another force strong enough to protect private property. Meanwhile, Chiang Kai-shek held tens of thousands of local troops, starved for cash to pay his army and harboring an intense hatred for the communists. And Chiang Kai-shek was the very iron fist they were looking for. Inside high-walled, closed-door drawing rooms within the isolated international settlement, fateful meetings took place between Chiang Kai-shek and the wealthiest capitalists in China, connected by two key figures on either side. On one side was Sung Tse-ven, heir to the Sung family, possessing sharp financial acumen and extensive relationships with the banking sector, acting as the architect of financial diplomacy, stepping forward directly to connect the two parties. On the other side was Yu Shaqing, shipping magnate and president of the Shanghai Chamber of Commerce, representing the plutocrats. Song Che-ven's father had shared a deep, decades-long friendship with Yu Shaqing. Thus, these two men constructed a perfect direct bridge between the Shanghai capitalists and Chiang Kai-shek, helping both sides reach secret, historic trade-offs of interest in March 1927. The Shanghai plutocrats agreed to advance millions of silver dollars to Chiang Kai-shek. This cash inflow enabled Chiang to pay his soldiers, stabilize his forces, and maintain the absolute loyalty of his army. Chinese private banking institutions, epitomized by the Shanghai branches of the Bank of China and the Bank of Communications, stepped forward to underwrite and purchase government bonds issued by Chiang's administration to mobilize capital rapidly. In return, Chiang Kai-shek pledged to use violence to crush the workers' strike movements, protect private property, and wipe out communist forces in Shanghai. Immediately thereafter, Chiang Kai-shek led the Northern Expedition Forces, surging into Shanghai, shattering Sun Quanfang's final lines of defense. The warlord suffered total defeat, and Shanghai officially fell into Chiang Kai-shek's hands. However, even with the warlord swept away, tens of thousands of workers were still controlling the factories and docks under the backing of Wang Jingwei's government in Wuhan. Chiang Kai-shek found himself trapped in a perilous legal predicament. Since the central government in Wuhan was shielding the Communist Party, if Chiang openly dispatched regular troops to open fire on workers, the Wuhan government would strip his position as commander-in-chief and charge him with counter-revolution. Chiang was forced to throw stones while hiding his hand, coordinating secretly with the Green Gang, the notorious triad organization in Shanghai at the time. The Shanghai plutocrats provided financial support to execute it. At dawn on the 12th of April 1927, thousands of underworld gunmen from the Green Gang wearing white armbands flooded out of the French concession, disguised as workers, and launched surprise attacks on Union posts. As the streets fell into chaos, Chiang finally sent regular troops in under the pretext of intervening to restore order. Under the guise of maintaining peace and security, the army conveniently disarmed and brutally massacred thousands of Communist Party members, intellectuals, and patriotic workers. Part 5. Chiang Kai-shek establishes the Nanjing Government. When news of the bloody massacre in Shanghai spread, the Wuhan government sank into utter fury. Wang Jingwei at that left wing immediately sided with the communist forces, publicly condemning Chiang Kai-shek's act of betrayal. On the 17th of April 1927, the Wuhan government officially issued a decree dismissing, stripping all positions, and expelling Chiang Kai-shek from the Kuomintang. Deposed by Wuhan and placed under the legal status of a counter-revolutionary, Chiang Kai-shek did not so much as blink. Relying on backing from the Shanghai Plutocrats and regular army, Chiang instantly struck back. Right in April 1927, beside the banks of the majestic Huangpu River, Chiang Kai-shek officially declared the establishment of the Nationalist government in Nanjing. And so, China at the time fell into a strange and chaotic triumvirate situation. The country was torn into three rival administrations. The north still lay under the yoke of the puppet Beiyang government based in Beijing, led by warlord Zhang Zuolin, backed by the Empire of Japan. Meanwhile, the south was split into two factions belonging to the same party. Chiang Kai-shek's Nanjing government, relying on the backing of the plutocrats and military, directly confronting Wang Jingwei's Wuhan government backed by workers and communist forces. However, Wang Jingwei's Wuhan government itself swiftly fell into a fatal paradox. They shielded the communists, yet the ones holding guns to protect Wang Jingwei's seat were the local warlord generals. Though these generals had submitted to the Kuomintang, their nature remained conservative and hostile to the communists. By July 1927, under suffocating pressure and intelligence indicating that communist forces were growing strong enough to threaten his power, Wang Jingwei panicked utterly. He decided to execute a 180-degree turn, hand-strangling the Kuomintang Communist Alliance through the July 15th Great Purge, expelling and massacring communists in the exact manner Chiang Kai-shek had previously done in Shanghai. Wang Jingwei personally committed an act of political suicide, causing the total collapse of the mass base of the Wuhan government. With no reason remaining to continue the confrontation, by the end of 1927, the internal Kuomintang reunified its apparatus under the common roof of Nanjing. Though Wang Jingwei retained a nominal position, he had lost all his facts. Chiang Kai-shek officially stepped onto the supreme leadership seat, becoming president of the nationalist government in Nanjing. Nanjing became the new capital of the Republic of China. Part 6. The Chen family. The political soul and secret service of Chiang Kai-shek's regime. When Chiang Kai-shek sat firmly upon the supreme throne in Nanjing, he understood that military strength on the front line could only bring down external enemies, to strangle every seed of discontent within society, extinguish ideological protests, and exert absolute control over every individual. An authoritarian regime required a far more terrifying weapon, a system of ideological control and underground secret services. And the ones chosen to shoulder that mission were the Chen family, headed by the two brothers, Chen Guofu and Chen Lifu, who held the political soul and security system of Chiang Kai-shek's government. The connection between the Chen family and Chiang Kai-shek was not merely a political alliance, but an obligation of gratitude dating back to the earliest days of the revolution. Chen Chimay, uncle to the two Chen brothers, was the godfather, sworn brother, mentor, and the man who introduced Chiang Kai-shek to Sun Yat-sen's Tongmenghui organization. After Chen Chimay was assassinated in 1916, Chiang Kai-shek supported his benefactor's two nephews to repay the favor. In 1926, Chen Lifu, after graduating with a master's degree in mining engineering in America, was hired by Chiang Kai-shek as his personal secretary. From here, the two Chen brothers swiftly became Chiang's closest aides. To consolidate power, The two Chen brothers founded an internal political organization called the CC Clique, gathering conservative and loyal elements within the Kuomintang, operating under four sharp pillars of power to protect the throne for Chiang Kai-shek, beginning with holding the central organization department of the Kuomintang for decades, to exert absolute control over the party's personnel apparatus. Anyone wishing to advance within the administrative system, local government, trade unions, or youth associations had to obtain the approval of the Chen family. As a result, they eliminated all party members with pro-communist, liberal, or disloyal tendencies toward Chiang Kai-shek. They transformed the Kuomintang from a broad revolutionary party into a bureaucratic apparatus subservient to Chiang's personal will. The second pillar was the establishment of a colossal intelligence and secret service network known as the Central Bureau of Investigation and Statistics, abbreviated as Zhongtong, under the direct command of Chen Lifu, tasked specifically with internal surveillance, counterintelligence, civilian monitoring, and wiping out seeds of opposition against the administration. Zhongtong planted a dense network of informants inside universities, factories, and state agencies. Their objectives were to thoroughly destroy the underground network of the Chinese Communist Party, CCP, in urban areas, monitor submitting warlord generals who still harbored intentions of betraying Chiang Kai-shek, and liquidate or intimidate liberal journalists and intellectuals who dared to criticize the policies of the Nanjing government. The third pillar of the Chen brothers was the iron hand controlling ideology, education, and the press. Chiang Kai-shek believed that to hold the throne, he needed to control the minds of the people. Chen Lifu realized this vision while serving as Minister of Education from 1938 to 1944. Education was transformed into the sharpest tool to mold future generations. The Chen family carried out textbook reforms, making the three principles of the people a compulsory and supreme subject at all educational levels. Teaching staff had to undergo strict political vetting. Those holding progressive or independent views were purged from the system. The Chen family modified the original three principles of the People Doctrine of Sun Yat-sen into a reinterpreted version. The original three principles, nationalism, democracy, and livelihood, were reinterpreted by the Chen family toward absolute centralization of power into the hands of the central government and Chiang Kai-shek personally. Instead of focusing on anti-imperialism and national liberation as in the original, the Chen family interpreted nationalism as absolute ideological uniformity. Any difference in speech, local political tendencies, or progressive ideas was labeled anti-national. National identity was assimilated with loyalty to the Nanjing government. Sun Yat-sen's original idea was close to moderate socialism, restricting monopoly capital, equalizing land rights. However, the Chen family reinterpreted it into a model of controlling the rural economy through cooperatives. In reality, this cooperative system was manipulated by the CC clique to purchase agricultural products from peasants at cheap prices and extinguish the influence of pro-communist forces in rural areas, rather than executing genuine land reform. The Chen family embedded party branch offices and Kuomintang youth organizations directly into schools. These organizations operated as underground eyes and ears, monitoring every statement made by students inside lecture halls as well as in daily life, ensuring the academic environment was entirely free of rebellious thoughts. All Western liberal ideas or Marxism were strictly forbidden. They further cornered and controlled the Central Daily News, the largest mouthpiece of the Kuomintang, alongside a host of printing houses, radio stations, and local newspapers, to direct public opinion entirely toward praising Chiang Kai-shek. The fourth pillar was the balance of military power, serving as a counterweight to the Whampoa clique. Chiang Kai-shek consistently applied the art of divide and rule. He partitioned his wings into two branches: the military branch, held by the officer corps originating from the Whampoa Military Academy, and the political administrative civilian branch, controlled by the Chen family's CC clique. The intense rivalry between the CC clique and the Whampoa faction ensured that no single individual or force beneath Chiang could grow overly powerful to threaten his sole supremacy. Later, upon entering the War of Resistance against Japan, the secret service agencies originating from the Whampoa faction were officially consolidated and developed into the notorious Juntong organization. Under the command of Dai Li, an outstanding cadet fiercely and absolutely loyal to the Whampoa Military Academy, a man dubbed the Himmler of China. From then on, a very specific division of tasks was drawn between the CC cliques, Juntong, and Dai Li's Juntong. Juntong, controlled by the Chen family, focused on civilian affairs and the internal Kuomintang party. Their primary surveillance targets were party members displaying discontent, intellectuals, professors, anti-war students, labor unions, and the underground network of the Chinese Communist Party in urban areas. Juntong focused on military and foreign affairs. Their primary surveillance targets were military officers, former warlord generals, to prevent betrayal, foreign spies, particularly Japan during World War II, Wang Jingwei's puppet administration, and the armed forces of the Communist Party. Chiang Kai-shek utilized Juntong to manage the administration, yet remained constantly vigilant against the overly vast influence of the Chen family. Meanwhile, Juntong operated independently, bypassing legal procedures or approval from the party organization department, taking direct orders exclusively from Chiang Kai-shek. Chiang Kai-shek consistently kept both sides checking one another, preventing a single monopoly intelligence agency from launching a coup against him. And to construct the throne of power even more firmly, Chiang Kai-shek required further ultimate weapons, money, and international influence. And he found the perfect answer to that power equation through a strategic move in Shanghai. A wedding of the century. Part 7. The wedding of the century between Chiang Kai-shek and Mei-ling. If one had to choose a marriage that possessed both the colors of love and a political alliance capable of turning the very destiny of modern China, it would be extremely difficult to overlook the story of Mei-ling and Chiang Kai-shek. People often referred to them as a power couple. He was the leader of the Kuomintang, while she was the cherished lady of the wealthy and prestigious Song family. A woman who spoke fluent English like a native, stepping into the world with the poise of a Western lady, yet understanding profoundly how the Chinese political arena operated. To understand why this marriage possessed such terrifying weight, one must look at the force standing behind Mei-ling. She was not merely a beautiful, Western-educated young lady who had graduated from a prestigious university in America, but also a vital link within the top financial empires of China at the time. Her father, Charlie Soong, was the financier standing behind the Shanghai Revolution. Her brother, Song Shevin, was Shanghai's premier financial architect. Her eldest sister, Song Ai-ling, married Kung-Xiang Shi, the banking magnate of Shanxi origin. Her second sister, Song Ching-ling, married Sun Yat-sen, the great revolutionary leader. The youngest daughter was none other than Song Mei-ling. Many believed that Chiang Kai-shek and Song Mei-ling married for political objectives. Yet behind that card game of power lay an infatuated love and a relentless 5-year pursuit by Chiang Kai-shek. Meeting Mei-ling for the first time at Sun Yat-sen's residence in 1922, the 35-year-old general was instantly captivated by the glamorous beauty, intellect, and free-spirited demeanor of the 25-year-old lady who had just returned from America. Chiang Kai-shek began practicing writing passionate love letters brimming with emotion, sending them to Shanghai. Chiang Kai-shek's love for Mei-ling bore no timidness but overflowed with the pride of a conqueror. At that time, Mei-ling was already in a deep romantic relationship with Liu Jiwen, an exceedingly handsome and talented Western-educated intellectual. Yet Chiang Kai-shek did not flinch in the slightest. With the composure of a general facing tens of thousands of troops, Chiang straightforwardly demonstrated his superiority. Liu Jiwen could offer Mei-ling the romance of an intellectual, but Chiang Kai-shek was the only one possessing sufficient military potential and grand ambition to elevate her to the position of First Lady of an entire empire. That overwhelming confidence, coupled with the vision of power, completely persuaded an ambitious woman like Song Mei-ling. And after winning the beauty's heart, Chiang Kai-shek acted in the true style of a leader. He officially appointed Liu Jiwen himself as the first mayor of the capital Nanjing, bringing the past to an end in an amicable and proud manner. To prove his absolute sincerity to the woman he loved and overcome the strict opposition of the Sung family, Chiang Kai-shek performed a sensational act, publicly issuing a newspaper announcement declaring the complete termination of all past marital relationships, accepting instruction in doctrine, and converting to Christianity in exact accordance with Mei-ling's wishes. Legend has it that Song Mei-ling fell in love with French plane trees, a tree species with an elegant shape and lush green foliage. To please the woman he loved, Chiang Kai-shek ordered rows of plane trees to be planted across the entire city, serving as a sweet oath ahead of their wedding day. If Miss Mei-ling likes plane trees, I will cover the whole of Nanjing in green with this tree. On the 1st of December 1927, the wedding of Chiang Kai-shek and Song Mei-ling was sumptuously held at the Majestic Hotel in Shanghai, becoming one of the most sensational weddings in Republican China. The wedding gathered over 1,000 guests, including top figures of the Kuomintang, Plutocrats, domestic banking representatives, alongside numerous Western diplomats, leaders of multinational corporations, foreign bankers, and international press journalists. The wedding ceremony dispatched a clear political message, affirming to the international community that Chiang Kai-shek's regime was aligned with Western civilization, rather than a backward warlord government. It was not merely a connection of military power with Western money and diplomacy, but also the beginning of a journey of soulmate companionship between Chiang Kai-shek and Song Mei-ling spanning over half a century. Chiang Kai-shek's emotional attachment and reliance on Song Mei-ling were reflected most clearly through his private diary entries. A man who could command tens of thousands of troops into a life-or-death battlefield without changing expression would instantly fall into anxiety and fear the moment his wife suffered a mild illness. Mei-ling is sick, my heart is infinitely anxious. When the two were at odds, his written pages grew heavy. Yet when she smiled by his side, the commander-in-chief's prose turned light and gentle. My heart feels miraculous comfort every time I sit and converse with Mei-ling. During nights of tense warfare, when Kai-shek stayed awake in his study, tossing and turning with anxiety over political situations or military pressure, Mei-ling would quietly sit by the piano. The melodious strains of Western classical music played by her own hands rose in the silent space, like a cool breeze washing away the fatigue and anxiety of the commander-in-chief. To Chiang, Mei-ling's piano playing was not merely music, but a rare space helping him escape the heavy shadow of military power and political intrigue. Though famous for being strict with subordinates and self-disciplined to an extreme, Chiang Kai-shek was readily willing to alter his daily habits for his wife. He maintained a soldier's lifestyle, rising at 5 in the morning and eating frugally, whereas Mei-ling was accustomed to a Western lifestyle, staying up late and drinking coffee. He never complained or forced her to change, but constantly and quietly instructed the servants to maintain a quiet environment so she could get enough sleep. However, Chiang Kai-shek also exposed a very ordinary jealousy. He was particularly sensitive to social relationships surrounding his wife. During her diplomatic activities in America, he continuously dispatched a barrage of telegrams purely to inquire about schedule details, remind her to take care of her health, and express his longing. To Chiang Kai-shek, Mei-ling was the sole woman who made him feel both proud to step out into the world with and insecure for fear of losing her. The love and doting affection that Chiang Kai-shek showered upon his wife were equally unprecedented in stature. A few years after their wedding, as the Nanjing government entered a period of stability, he ordered the construction of the Mei-ling palace residence as a personal gift to her. Viewed from above, the rows of French plane trees winding around the mansion form the shape of a giant jade necklace, with the blue tile-roofed villa acting as the precious jewel nestled right at the center of the pendant. It was not merely an architectural project, but a historical witness, affirming the proud love the head of state held for his first lady. That marriage gave Chiang Kai-shek a life partner, a political advisor, and an outstanding diplomat. A woman who became his sharpest soft weapon on the international stage, and the sole peaceful harbor in the tempestuous life of the leader of the Republic of China. Conversely, the Song family also received the sturdiest shield of the era. The strong boxes of the Song family were protected directly by Chiang Kai-shek's military might. Part 8. The final phase of the Northern Expedition, overthrowing Zhang Zuolin and nominal unification of China. Following the wedding of the century, in April 1928, Chiang Kai-shek officially launched the second phase of the Northern Expedition. The objective now was Zhang Zuolin, leader of the Fengshan warlord clique, the man sitting in the puppet presidential chair of the Beiyang government in Beijing, backed by the covert intervention of Imperial Japan. Chiang Kai-shek's National Revolutionary Army launched a massive general offensive toward the north. Facing overwhelming military pressure and the collapse of warlord allies, Zhang Zuolin could not hold his ground. In June 1928, Chiang Kai-shek's forces closed in on and captured Beijing, forcing Zhang Zuolin to order a total withdrawal of all Fengtian forces back to their home base in Manchuria. Yet, on the train ride returning to his home region on the early morning of the 4th of June 1928, a horrific explosion shattered the night at Huanggutun Station. Japan's Kwantung Army had planted a bomb to assassinate Zhang Zuolin. This event was the result of a deeply fractured relationship between Zhang Zuolin and the Japanese. Previously, Japan had pumped money and weapons to back Chiang in order to protect the South Manchuria Railway and block Soviet influence. But once he had secured Beijing, Zhang Zuolin turned defiant, refusing to grant additional economic privileges to Japan and actively opening the doors for Britain and America to enter Manchuria to use the West against Japan. When defeated by Chiang Kai-shek in Beijing, Zhang Zuolin continued to refuse demands to disarm and submit to Japanese protection. Realizing that Zhang Zuolin had become usable but unmanageable, Colonel Komoto Daisaku, alongside a group of radical officers within the Kuomintang army, surreptitiously planted a bomb to assassinate him. The Japanese militarist faction believed that creating a power vacuum, leaving Manchuria headless, would be the perfect pretext to send troops in to occupy this entire resource-rich territory. Yet those calculations by the Japanese were mistaken. His son, Zhang Shuiliang, commonly called the Young Marshal, succeeded to power. Facing pressure from Japan and the tide of the era, Zhang Shuiliang made a decision that altered the historical landscape. On the 29th of December 1928, he officially declared the Northeast flag replacement, submitting to the Kuomintang, lowering the five-colored flag of the old government and raising the blue sky with a white sun flag of the Kuomintang. This decision stemmed not only from patriotism, but also from a fateful connection. The relationship between Zhang Shuiliang and the Chiang family began in the summer of 1925 in Shanghai, when he met Song Mei-ling, the young lady newly returned from her studies in America. The young Marshal of Manchuria and Song Mei-ling maintained a timeless soulmate friendship. What bound them was a resonance of thought. Song Mei-ling admired Zhang Shuiliang's candor and valuing of righteousness, while the young Marshal held in exceptionally high regard the vision, decisiveness, and intellect of the woman who would later become the First Lady of the Republic of China. That deep friendship served as a soft bridge, setting aside initial doubts so that Zhang Shuiliang could join hands with Chiang Kai-shek. Recognizing Zhang Shuiliang's prestige, Chiang Kai-shek officially swore a blood brotherhood with him and appointed him Vice Commander-in-Chief of the Army, Navy, and Air Force, making him the number 2 figure of authority in the Republic of China. The era of warlords tearing China apart, which had dragged on for 12 years, officially came to a close. For the first time since 1911, China possessed a central government unifying territory from south to north. The Nanjing Nationalist Government, headed by Chiang Kai-shek. Yet the price of that unification was the birth of an absolute power alliance. A new era opened for China, an era in which the destiny of 400 million people would lie entirely in the hands of 4 families cornering the entire state apparatus. The 4 great families. Military strength belonged to Chiang Kai-shek. Ideological secret services were held by the Chen brothers, and foreign affairs fell to the Sung family. And the final piece to complete that power alliance was full control over the nation's economic lifeline. The man who stepped forward to build that machine to corner the economic lifeline was the head of the Kung family, Kung-Xiang-shi. Part 9. The Kung family. Kung-Xiang-shi was born in 1880 in Taiguo, Shanxi province, the traditional financial hub of China during the Qing dynasty, as a 75th generation descendant of Confucius. From the moment he cried at birth, he was draped in the prestigious mantle of a prominent intellectual family line. His family had for generations run the Shaanxi Piaohao business, a form of traditional private banking specializing in pawnshops, lending, and issuing long-distance money transfer credits across China at the time. The techniques of transferring money across thousands of miles without transporting bulky gold and silver, alongside the management of northern pawnshop chains, penetrated Kung-Soong's blood from his youth. It granted him a sharp, unique instinct for money and credit mechanisms. Unlike old Shanxi merchants, confined to Chinese character ledgers, Kung-Soong realized early on that a Western wave was surging in. He sought out schools established by Western missionaries in Shanxi and Beijing to learn English, absorbing modern science and economic thought. In 1901, he left China to study in America. In 1906, he graduated with a bachelor's degree from Oberlin College, and just 1 year later, in 1907, he received a master's degree in economics from prestigious Yale University. His time in America not only equipped him with Western business acumen, but also helped him construct an extensive network of relationships with American politicians and financial institutions, a vital foundation for his later economic diplomacy activities. In 1914, in Yokohama, Japan, Kung-Soong married Song Ai-ling, the eldest daughter of the capitalist Charlie Soong and eldest sister to Song Ching-ling and Song Mei-ling. The marriage brought about a fusion between Kung-Soong's traditional Shanxi financial muscle and Song Ai-ling's Western-educated strategic intellect. Ai-ling was the first Chinese woman to study in America, possessing sharp political vision and immense ambition for power. Under Ai-ling's sharp strategic advisement, Kung-Soong instantly broke out of family business proportions. He became the exclusive distribution agent for America's Standard Oil Corporation in Shanxi, reaping colossal net profits from the domestic market's thirst for lighting fuel. Throughout the 1910s and 1920s, he utilized this capital source to expand his private business network, aggressively acquiring pawnshops, investing in coal mines, trading in chemicals and salt, and notably founding Yuhua Bank in 1915. The Yuhua Bank network rapidly reached out from Shanxi to northern economic centers like Beijing and Tianjin, turning him into a Shanxi banking magnate wielding formidable personal financial power. Yet the ambitions of the Kung-Soong couple did not stop at business. As early supporters and financial backers of Sun Yat-sen, Kung-Soong used money as the key to unlock the doors to the center of power. In 1927, he assumed the position of Minister of Industry in Wang Jingwei's Wuhan Nationalist Government. When this government collapsed, he swiftly redirected his path toward the Nanjing Government, holding the post of Minister of Industry and Commerce from 1928 to 1931. The moment he stepped into the central government, he faced an empty treasury. To balance national budget revenues and expenditures, he acted with extreme severity, raising tobacco taxes up to 50% and threatening a 28% increase in salt taxes. This action met with strike shutdowns and fierce resistance from the Shanghai tobacco factory bourgeoisie. Yet Kung-Soong did not yield an inch. Not stopping at tough tax collection policies in Shanghai, Kung-Soong further proved to be an immensely shrewd backstage political director. Following the Central Plains War of 1930, Shanxi warlord Yan Xishan failed in his confrontation with Chiang Kai-shek, forced to relinquish all posts and flee to Dalian. Relying on his Shanxi roots and deep pre-existing relationships, Kung-Soong continuously lobbied and persuaded Chiang Kai-shek to grant Yan Xishan an avenue of survival. Thanks to Kung's untiring efforts within the central government, Chiang Kai-shek finally agreed to allow Yan Xishan to return to Shanxi in 1931, and by 1934 officially recognized Yan as the de facto leader of the territory. This move of factional diplomacy not only helped Kung-Xiangxi firmly consolidate his Shanxi rear base, but also transformed him into an irreplaceable power bridge between the Nanjing administration and local forces. In 1931, Kung-Xiangxi officially entered the Kuomintang Central Executive Committee, preparing for the phase of cornering the entire national economy. Entering the War of Resistance against Japan, Kung-Xiangxi reached the pinnacle of his political career when he assumed the position of Premier of the Republic of China. In January 1938, as Japanese forces swept across Shandong and blew up the Kung family estate in Taishan, Chen, 77th generation descendant of Confucius, holding the title of Duke Yan Sheng, had to flee to Hankou. Kung-Xiangxi personally stepped forward to receive his kinsman. This event was not merely familial, but was transformed by him into a political performance, to affirm the righteousness and legitimacy of the Republican government against the advancing invasion of fascist Japan. Also in 1938, following consecutive Japanese setbacks and guerrilla victories, recapturing several areas, Kung-Xiangxi courageously poured a bucket of cold water over the enemy when he declared on national radio, "God is helping China." From a Shanxi merchant, Kung-Xiangxi transformed himself into an irreplaceable link within the Nanjing government. He was simultaneously Chiang Kai-shek's brother-in-law, a bridge stabilizing submitted northern warlords, such as Yan Xishan, and the face representing traditional Confucian intellectuals cooperating with the Republican regime. Yet the true power transforming the Kung family into one of the four great families manipulating the entire nation did not reside in mere political titles. It lay in the moment Kung-Xiangxi joined hands with his brother-in-law, Song Se-ven, to establish an unprecedented financial monopoly in Chinese history. The union between the Kung and Song families was about to create a colossal money-siphoning machine, preparing to corner the entire banking system, manipulate the currency, and dictate the economic lifeline of the whole nation. Part 10. The Kung-Soong Combination, cornering the national economy and completing the four great families' alliance manipulating China. At the end of 1927, the wedding of the century between Chiang Kai-shek and Mei-ling took place, tightly completing the alliance of the four great families. Section 10.1. Seizing the Customs Bureau. Regaining tariff autonomy for China. At the beginning of 1928, Song Se-ven officially assumed the post of Minister of Finance of the Nanjing Nationalist Government. He struck a historic blow, seizing the Customs Bureau and regaining tariff autonomy for China. This stood as one of Song Se-ven's greatest financial triumphs, transforming him into a technocratic legend in the eyes of the Western financial world. Ever since the defeat in the First Opium War in 1840, and the humiliating unequal treaties that followed, the Maritime Customs Service of China had fallen completely into the hands of the British and Western powers. Tax collection officials were all Westerners. Import and export tariffs were controlled and kept at a paltry rate of merely 5% by Western powers. Painful above all, the entirety of the vast tax revenue collected did not flow into the national treasury, but was impounded in foreign banks to service the Qing dynasty's war indemnities. The Chinese government could not touch a single coin. Utilizing his Wall Street experience and a clear-headed approach to negotiations, in July 1928, Song Se-ven pressed representatives of the American government into signing the Sino-American Tariff Treaty. America became the first great power to recognize the tariff autonomy of the Nanjing Government. This blow created a massive domino effect. Britain, France, and Japan were forced, one after another, to bow and restore tariff autonomy to China after nearly a century of deprivation. Holding full power of self-determination, Song Tse-ven brought the Customs Bureau directly under the Nanjing Ministry of Finance and immediately restructured the entire tariff schedule. He slapped extremely high import tariffs, ranging from 30 to 40%, down on luxury goods from the West, such as motor cars, foreign liquor, and tobacco, simultaneously protecting domestic manufacturing and transforming the Customs Bureau into a giant money pump for the Republican government. Throughout the Nanjing decade from 1927 to 1937, customs revenue exploded, contributing 50 to 60% of total government revenue, generating abundant finances for Chiang Kai-shek to sustain his colossal military machine. Beside customs, Song Tse-ven pressed on to tighten control over the Treasury's second gold mine, the salt tax. At the time, salt was a state monopoly subject to heavy taxation, which led to salt smuggling syndicates forming armed forces but equipped with guns and ammunition, raging across the coastal marshes of Jiangnan and posing a direct threat to the vital revenues of the state. To protect the customs and salt tax revenues, in 1930, Song Tse-ven established the Salt Revenue Guards and Customs Police to safeguard these income sources, dedicated to patrolling ports and destroying salt smuggling dens. Song Tse-ven equipped this unit with modern American standard armored materiel and placed it under Sun Li-jen, a brilliant young military talent, to train directly. When the War of Resistance against Japan erupted in 1937, this force marched straight to the front lines, fighting courageously to defend Shanghai. Later reorganized into the legendary 38th Division, it became one of the most brilliant steel fists of the Kuomintang army on the anti-fascist battlefield against Imperial Japan. In November 1928, building upon the success of the Central Bank of Guangzhou, which Song Tse-ven had operated 4 years prior to serve the Northern Expedition, he officially elevated its scale and established the Central Bank of China, headquartered in Shanghai, assuming the seat of first governor himself. This was no mere ordinary bank. It was designed as the heart of the entire Republican economy, the nerve center managing national reserves, regulating credit flows, and directing the money market. By applying modern governance standards modeled on the Federal Reserve System, Fed, alongside consultations from Wall Street experts, Song Tse-ven transformed the central bank into a solid financial fortress for the Nanjing government. Parallel to building the central bank, Song Tse-ven carried out a grand overhaul of the internal tax system, a labyrinth of corruption that had drained the people's strength for centuries. He resolutely abolished likin, a destructive internal transit tax that permitted local warlords to arbitrarily erect toll stations on any commercial goods passing between provinces. Instead, Song Tse-ven unified the entire tax system under the Nanjing Ministry of Finance, applying modern consumption taxes levied on industrial goods, such as textiles, matches, tobacco, and flour. This move not only fully unleashed the circulation of domestic goods and eliminated the harassment of local officials, but also brought the Nanjing government a stable and transparent source of budgetary revenue. He was also the man who laid the foundations for the Kuomintang's modern financial system and established the government bond market in Shanghai. Prior to this, Although Shanghai was already the most bustling financial center in the Far East, the market was entirely dominated by Western banks and private bourgeois elites. While old Chinese government bonds were viewed as risky scraps of paper, whenever the government wished to mobilize capital from the public or banks, it had to issue government bonds or public loans. Song Tse-wen utilized his personal prestige and Wall Street mindset to professionalize this bond market. Upon issuance, he directly listed national public bonds on the Shanghai Stock Exchange, so that citizens' banks and investment funds could buy and sell them among themselves on a daily basis. He elevated these public bonds into the most highly liquid investment instruments on the Shanghai Stock Exchange, bearing attractive interest rates and backed directly by solid customs tax revenues. Public bonds were no longer risky scraps of paper, but had turned into products that people could comfortably invest in and trade. Thus, by connecting the Nanjing government into Shanghai's pre-existing financial machinery, Song Tse-wen transformed the massive private capital flows of the Shanghai Plutocrats into an abundant financial source funding the nation. Section 10.2. Nationalizing the private banking system. Controlling the national currency flow. Prior to 1933, the Chinese market was a nightmare, with hundreds of types of silver ingots of varying weights and purities existing simultaneously, as dictated by each local warlord region, bank and merchant shop. In April 1933, Song Tse-wen passed a law completely prohibiting the use of silver ingots in all commercial transactions and tax payments. He forced the entire economy to utilize a single standard currency. The yuan minted by the central bank, unifying under a single common currency, eliminated monetary chaos, sharply reduced transaction costs when crossing different regions, seamlessly interconnected the domestic market, and fostered industrial and commercial development. Simultaneously, it placed supreme control over exchange rates and currency circulation directly into the hands of the Central Bank of China. However, in October 1933, Finance Minister Song Tse-wen officially resigned to protest Chiang Kai-shek's policy of militarizing the national budget. Song Tse-wen remained steadfast in his goal of balancing the budget and achieving sustainable economic development, utilizing national budget resources to reconstruct the country and build infrastructure. Yet Chiang Kai-shek continuously pressured the financial sector to pour national resources into his war machine. For the civil war against the Communist Party and the suppression of local warlords, consuming over 80% of total state expenditure. Chiang Kai-shek could not print money indiscriminately because Song Tse-wen tightly controlled the central bank according to silver standard principles. Therefore, Chiang constantly coerced Song Tse-wen to issue additional public bonds to borrow money to cover military deficits. Song Tse-wen understood that reckless bond issuance would destroy the entire economy. Under intense pressure, he submitted his resignation as Minister of Finance in protest. Immediately, Chiang Kai-shek installed his brother-in-law Kung-Soong to replace him as Minister of Finance. A few months later, Kung-Soong also assumed the concurrent post of central bank governor. If Song Tse-wen was a sharp yet rigid technocratic sword, Kung-Soong was pliable, ready to accommodate every military budget demand from Chiang. On the 19th of June 1934, U.S. President Franklin D. Roosevelt signed the Silver Purchase Act, causing world silver prices to skyrocket. At that time, China was the last remaining major power in the world maintaining the silver standard. The nation's entire monetary flow and economic health depended on this precious metal. Skyrocketing silver prices led to a severe drain of physical silver out of China. A sharp drop in domestic money circulation caused commodity prices across China to plunge. Businesses went bankrupt en masse, and unemployment spiked. This triggered a brutal chain reaction. The entire banking system froze, and the economy of the Republic of China plunged into deep deflation and recession, teetering on the edge of total collapse. Yet in the eyes of seasoned financial players, crisis was a once-in-a-millennium opportunity. Following his military budget disputes with Chiang Kai-shek, Song Se-ven stepped down as Minister of Finance, but he did not withdraw into retirement. Recognizing that Western capitalist groups, such as Britain, America, and France, were eager to invest capital into China, yet deeply fearful of the corruption and risks associated with the Nanjing military government, Song Se-ven chose an entirely different move to monopolize foreign capital flowing into China. Based on strategic advice from Jean Monnet, the famous French financier who later became a founding father of the European Union, Song Se-ven established the China Development Finance Corporation, CDFC, in June 1934. Nominally, CDFC was a 100% private company. Song Se-ven transformed it into an exclusive bridge to underwrite and receive the entire stream of Western capital, Britain, America, France, investing in domestic Chinese railway construction, mining, and industrial projects. To build absolute trust among plutocrats, he shrewdly enticed his brother-in-law Kung-Soong, alongside two leading minds of China's private financial realm at the time, to contribute capital. Chiang, the vice general manager holding supreme real power at the Bank of China, who constantly fought to preserve independence for the nation's largest commercial institution, and Chen, founder and general manager of the Shanghai Commercial Bank, a plutocrat dubbed the J.P. Morgan of China, with illustrious international prestige. From China Development Finance Corporation, Sung spun a complex cross-ownership network to acquire industrial, mining and transport companies, then carved up executive seats for his two younger brothers, Sung Tze Liang and Sung Tze An, transforming state capital into exclusive family assets, and erecting a miniature financial state standing completely outside military control. When the silver crisis erupted and drained banks, China Development Finance Corporation remained completely unscathed thanks to holding hard Western foreign currencies, turning Song Se-ven into one of the world's wealthiest men. In March 1935, when the silver crisis drove Shanghai's largest private banks to the brink of running completely out of physical silver coins, Kung-Soong made an offer that could not be refused. The Nanjing government would issue 100 million yuan in public bonds to inject capital and rescue two private banking giants, the Bank of China and the Bank of Communications. Yet that was no lifeline. It was a ruthless takeover strike. In exchange for this bond injection, the Nanjing government forced both banks to issue new shares and sell over 50% of the controlling equity back to the state at nominal prices. Chiang, leader of the Bank of China, resolutely resisted to defend the autonomy of the banking sector. But under direct military pressure from Chiang Kai-shek and the threat of immediate bankruptcy, he was bitterly forced to sign. A leadership coup took place instantly. Chiang Kai-shek was dismissed from his position at the Bank of China and pushed over to serve as Minister of Railways. Song Se-ven immediately stepped into the seat of Chairman of the Bank of China, while Kung-Soong directly took over the Bank of Communications. Together with the central bank and the Farmers' Bank, which were already state-owned. The March 1935 takeover officially completed the puzzle piece for the four powerful banks falling into government hands. It did not stop there, for they set up two additional special financial bureaus. The Postal and Savings Bureau, which helped them sweep up the small savings of ordinary people across every village, and the Bureau of Foreign Exchange, which allowed them to tighten their grip and monopolize the entire flow of foreign currency entering and leaving the country. From this point on, the super-powerful cartel known as the Four Banks and Two Bureaus was officially born, joining hands to manipulate and control more than 70% of the total assets and money flow of the entire Chinese economy. The nation's financial lifeblood fell completely into the hands of the Four Great Families Alliance. Local Shanghai industrial capitalists lost their capital autonomy, becoming utterly dependent on credit quotas from the Four Great Families, Four Banks, and Two Bureaus. The room for independent private economic development was suffocated. Kai-shek used his authority to create business monopolies for his family's backdoor companies. Most notably his son Kung-Ling's Yangtze Development Corporation. These companies were granted exclusive privileges to import motorcars, electronics, and medicines, while engaging in hoarding and speculation, holding back goods to inflate prices on the black market in order to drain the wartime economy. Section 10.3. The Fabi Reform. The Nanjing Government abolishes the silver standard, monopolizing the issuance of Fabi paper currency. Once they had taken full control of the banks, the Nanjing Government possessed enough power to carry out a major currency reform. In September 1935, the British government dispatched Sir Frederick Laith Ross, Britain's chief economic advisor, to China to assist with the reform. To escape the international silver crisis, which was causing a severe drain of silver bullion from China overseas and threatening to collapse the economy. On the 3rd of November 1935, Minister of Finance and Central Bank Governor Kung-Soong announced the complete abandonment of the silver standard. The government issued a decree confiscating all metallic silver held by the public, bringing it into state vaults. Silver was strictly forbidden from circulation. Going even further, all gold bullion and foreign exchange held by the public were forcibly surrendered to the state. In its place, the government issued a single, exclusive paper currency called legal tender, or Fabi, controlled by the four state banks. This new Fabi currency no longer held intrinsic value, serving merely as a fiat paper currency. For Fabi to hold value, it needed to be pegged to and backed by strong foreign currencies, namely the British pound and the US dollar. From then on, citizens traded entirely using paper banknotes printed exclusively by the state, rather than silver coins. The birth of Fabi marked the stripping of currency issuance rights from all private banks. Only the banking system controlled by Kung-Soong possessed the right to print money. From this privilege, a system of crony credit was swiftly established. Kung-Soong used his issuing authority to grant unlimited, ultra-low interest or unbacked credit lines to commercial conglomerates owned by his relatives, most notably the import, export and shipping companies of his son, Kung-ling. While independent domestic industrial capitalists were choked by a lack of capital and forced to borrow at extortionate interest rates, the Kung family businesses used this printed-out capital to absorb lucrative manufacturing sectors, such as textiles, salt, food supplies, and mining. When the whirlwind currency reform decree of the 3rd of November 1935 struck Shanghai, forcing all private banks to confiscate and surrender their physical silver reserves to the state. Chen Guangfu, the legendary general manager of the Shanghai Commercial and Savings Bank, initially reacted with utmost outrage and bitterness. Having spent his whole life building an independent private financial system grounded on trust and the solid backing of pure silver bullion, he viewed this act by the Nanjing authorities as open robbery, a brutal death blow aimed directly at the fortress of the private economy. Chen Guangfu understood all too clearly that stripping private commercial banks of their silver reserves in exchange for unbacked Fabi paper notes was no different from turning the hard-earned assets of shareholders and citizens into virtual figures on paper, ready to be blown away by the government's money-printing machine. In tense, secret meetings across Shanghai, he fiercely opposed the policy and sought ways to delay the handover. However, as a pragmatic mind trained at the University of Pennsylvania, Chen Guangfu quickly realized that after Kung-Xiang and Sung-Si had swallowed the four great banks and seized the state's entire apparatus of force, any direct resistance was suicidal. Rather than letting his bank be coerced or shut down, Chen Guangfu executed a shrewd, pragmatic move, shifting from confrontation to strategic cooperation to save himself. He agreed to comply with the decree, surrendering his bank's silver to the government, but in return demanded that Chiang Kai-shek grant him political authority to oversee and directly shape the new financial system. Recognizing that Chen Guangfu's illustrious international reputation was a vital card that could persuade Washington. Thanks to his neutral prestige as a purely private banker, Kung-Soong immediately appointed him chairman of the National Currency Committee and dispatched him as chief special envoy to the United States to negotiate. It was in Washington in early 1936 that, through his innate diplomatic talent, Chen Guangfu directly signed the Sino-American Silver Agreement with U.S. Treasury Secretary Henry Morgenthau. This deal allowed China to sell the massive quantity of silver confiscated from its populace back to the U.S. in exchange for physical gold bullion and strong U.S. dollar reserves. This created a solid foreign exchange cushion, serving as the robust backbone backing the nation's fledgling Fabi currency on the international market. The gold and U.S. dollars acquired from this transaction helped Fabi maintain a stable exchange rate in its early years, rescuing the Chinese economy from collapse and creating a crucial financial foundation that enabled the nationalist government to maintain its military budget during the opening phase of the War of Resistance against Japan. This event also marked the end of independent private capitalism in Shanghai, officially transferring the nation's entire economic lifeline into state hands and binding China's financial flow tightly to the fate of the nationalist regime. This decisive reform measure brought absolute victory and supreme centralized power to the Nanjing government. And yet, it was precisely here that tragedy began. When currency was no longer backed by real silver, the restraints controlling inflation completely collapsed. Chiang Kai-shek and Kung-Soong now held an infinite money-printing machine in their hands. From customs, the salt tax, and the banks, all the way to the power to print money. The Four Great Families Alliance had completed the final link in manipulating the entire economic lifeblood of a nation of 400 million people. This colossal financial machine, on the one hand, provided Chiang Kai-shek with sufficient resources to fund the War of Resistance against Japan when it erupted in 1937, but on the other hand, laid the groundwork for one of the most terrifying hyperinflationary disasters in Far Eastern history. a catastrophe that would later burn the entire Republic of China regime to the ground. Section 10.4. The War of Resistance against Japan and the Pursuit of US Aid. In the summer of 1937, the Marco Polo Bridge incident broke out, marking Japan's launch of a full-scale war to invade all of China. Within a short period, Tokyo's military machine, with its overwhelming firepower, swept through the north, relentlessly overrunning and crushing vital urban centers like Beijing and Tianjin. The nightmare swiftly spread down the eastern seaboard as Shanghai fell. After months of bloody, exhausting battle, with defense lines shattered, the Republic of China forces no longer possessed the strength to hold back a vastly superior industrial military power like Japan. The inevitable consequence followed. The capital, Nanjing, fell in late 1937 amidst mourning and chaos, paving the way for the historically infamous Nanjing Massacre. Before long, strategic locations from Wuhan all the way to the seaport of Guangzhou collapsed in succession. Japan's occupation of the entire coastal plain and the lower reaches of the Yangtze River, the economic heartland and the Nationalist Party's most lucrative source of tax revenue, dealt a lethal blow. Snapping the regime's financial spine, Chiang Kai-shek's government lost over 80% of its customs revenues, forcing it to flee and retreat deep into the rugged, mountainous interior. Establishing a wartime capital in Chongqing, although he had set aside differences to enter the Second United Front with the Communists to jointly resist foreign aggression, the burden on Chiang Kai-shek's shoulders remained immensely heavy. He had to strain to sustain a massive military machine on the front line while covertly maintaining forces to blockade and contain the Communist Party in the rear. Facing the threat of an exhausted treasury and complete collapse, Chiang Kai-shek was forced to step up his diplomatic card to draw aid from abroad. In the summer of 1940, with the wartime capital of Chongqing suffering heavy bombardment by Japanese aircraft, Chiang Kai-shek dispatched Song Se-ven to the United States to seek help. Leveraging his extensive connections with Wall Street financiers, Song Se-ven established China Defense Supplies in Washington, which served as an intermediary agency to legally procure American weapons, turning the company into a giant funnel to draw in Western aid flows. Initially, negotiations for aid proceeded very slowly, as the United States still wished to maintain neutrality in the war. However, a historic turning point occurred on the 7th of December, 1941, when Imperial Japan launched a surprise attack on Pearl Harbor, dragging the United States officially into World War II. Overnight, the United States and China officially became allies on the same front against Japan. Seizing this golden opportunity, Song Se-ven immediately stepped up negotiations and achieved successive breakthroughs in just 2 years. In 1941, he placed China on the list of recipients for free or low-cost American military assistance under the Lend-Lease Act. By 1942, he personally brought back a massive aid package worth $500 million in cash from the U.S. Treasury to serve the war effort against Japan and stabilize the macroeconomic environment, which was on the brink of inflation. Not stopping at money, Song Se-ven also joined hands with his sister, Song Mei-ling, and a former American pilot named Claire Chennault to persuade the White House to allow American pilots to volunteer their help. Using the funds secured from the U.S., they purchased a fleet of legendary P-40 fighters, founding the Flying Tigers Squadron. This squadron became an iron shield in the skies, shooting down scores of enemy aircraft and saving the lives of millions of Chinese citizens from the ruthless bombings of Imperial Japan. Section 10.5. A vicious backstab. Japan's counterfeit currency campaign. Yet, efforts to rescue the wartime economy were instantly dealt a devastating sneak attack by the Empire of Japan. Enraged by the massive influx of US aid, and recognizing the fundamental vulnerability of the Fabi currency, as the Nanjing government began to loosen financial discipline and abuse the printing press. The Imperial Japanese Army General Staff launched a weapon of mass destruction without gunshots, codenamed Operation S. At top-secret printing plants located in Tokyo and Shanghai, the Japanese utilized the most advanced printing technology to produce billions of counterfeit Fabi banknotes, with precision down to the individual paper fiber. This massive quantity of counterfeit money was flooded into the black market by espionage networks and speculators. They used the fake notes to buy up all the food and daily necessities of the populace, while simultaneously using them to gather up real US dollars circulating in society. This flood of counterfeit money quickly mixed with genuine currency, inundating the market and causing the volume of paper money in circulation to bloat uncontrollably. This vicious strike broke the Nanjing government's ability to intervene and stabilize the market, plunging China into an inflationary hell. In 1944, a corrupt scandal surrounding the profiteering from the $500 million US aid package erupted. The Kung family was asked for speculation, hoarding, and corruption of aid funds, igniting fierce public outrage and causing Washington to lose all trust, realizing that Kung-Soong had become a political liability. Sun Quan immediately seized the opportunity, combining it with pressure from the American side to cut aid, forcing Chiang Kai-shek to sidelining Kung-Soong. In November 1944, Kung-Soong was stripped of all positions, bringing a complete end to his era of financial monopoly that had lasted over a decade. Song Se-ven officially returned to the pinnacle of power, taking the seats of Premier and Minister of Foreign Affairs. Part 11. The Dark Chapter of Crony Capitalism. From Asset Takeover to Hyperinflationary Hell, from 1945 to 1948. Immediately following the end of the Second World War in 1945, with Japan's surrender, the Chinese people once hoped to enter an era of peaceful reconstruction and economic revival. However, for the four great families, Chiang, Song, Kung, and Chen, this was not an opportunity to save the nation, but rather the single greatest lucrative prey in history to seize and plunder. This process was recorded in history through a deeply satirical term, ji-shou, meaning to rob assets under the guise of takeover, rather than acquiring them legally. The four great families operated a systematic mechanism to seize industrial assets reclaimed from the Japanese. Immediately after Japan's surrender, the nationalist government swiftly established specialized agencies, such as the Enemy and Puppet Asset Takeover Committee. Heading these supreme economic and financial bodies were members or confidants of the four great families, most notably Song Se-ven, who then held the office of Premier, and Kung-Soong. All textile mills, machine shops, mineral mines and chemical plants left behind by Japan or the puppet regime were declared national assets. Independent private enterprises were completely sidelined, denied any opportunity to access or bid for these assets. Under the guise of state-owned enterprise, the four great families colluded to transfer actual ownership into the hands of their backdoor companies. They merged a series of recovered factories to establish massive state-controlled conglomerates, such as the China Textile Development Corporation. Song Tseven placed his confidants and subordinates into top executive positions across these conglomerates. These corporations received priority access to newly printed credit lines from the central bank, usurping national resources to maximize profits for their interest group. Many valuable assets and factories were unreasonably undervalued by takeover officials, then quietly resold or had their exploitation rights transferred to private companies owned by the Kung-Soong families. The mega-conglomerates, run by Song Tseven's planted operatives, enjoyed exclusive access to foreign exchange reserves, import-export licenses, and particularly preferential credit from the four major state banks. National capitalists, the independent industrial owners of Shanghai, were cut off from credit lines, unable to compete with the government's player and referee conglomerates. Free domestic manufacturing was utterly suffocated. In newly taken over areas such as Shanghai, Nanjing, and Taiwan, Song Tseven applied a deeply insidious financial weapon. Forcing currency exchanges at discriminatory rates, the local population was forced to exchange puppet currency for Fabi at extremely disadvantageous rates. This measure instantly wiped out most of the purchasing power and accumulated wealth of the local bourgeoisie and public in key industrial regions. While local residents went bankrupt, the four great families used their absolute advantage in held Fabi to buy up all remaining real estate, shares, and raw materials at dirt-cheap prices. From 1946 to 1947, as the nationalist-communist civil war escalated, military expenditure for Chiang Kai-shek's regime surged. The government was forced to print massive quantities of additional Fabi paper money, triggering hyperinflation. Citizens and financiers lost all faith in paper currency, rushing to buy gold and US dollars on the open market to preserve their assets, causing gold prices in Shanghai to jump by the hour. To salvage the situation, Song Tseven ordered the central bank to release the nation's colossal gold reserves, recently taken over following the victory over fascist Japan, for public sale on the open market. He expected that an abundant supply of gold would crush speculative factions, cool down gold prices, and soak up a massive volume of circulating Fabi paper notes back into the treasury to curb inflation. When the central bank sold gold at a fixed price lower than the black market rate, society's thirst for gold did not subside, but instead exploded. Whatever amount of gold was released was instantly swallowed whole by the market. In just a few months, the government dumped over 3.3 million taels of gold, representing nearly the entirety of national reserves, yet inflation showed no sign of easing. By early February 1947, when the central bank realized its gold vaults were empty and abruptly halted sales, the market immediately plunged into panic. Gold and US dollar prices surged 30 to 50% in just a matter of days, pushing the economy of the nationalist-controlled areas into total collapse. While Song Tseven was struggling to stabilize prices, backdoor companies belonging to the Kung family and their allied crony capitalists saw this as a once-in-a-century speculative opportunity and moved one step ahead. Having caught wind of the news, they banded together to borrow massive amounts of Fabi from commercial banks, hiring thousands of people to pose as buyers in queues. While combining this with large volume purchase orders behind the scenes to sweep up all of the government's cheap gold. After capturing the national gold, the Kung faction hoarded it, waiting until Song Tseven ran out of resources and closed the market. As gold prices shot to their peak, they released it back onto the black market for immense amounts of Fabi, or directly converted the gold into physical US dollars and smuggled them into safe accounts in the United States. The 1947 gold scandal ignited a terrifying wave of outrage among the public, the intelligentsia, and even within the government itself. Scholars like Fu Xinian wrote article after article attacking the regime, while rival political factions, such as the Chen brothers' CC clique, accused Song Se-ven of condoning wealthy oligarchs and siphoning off national assets. Facing overwhelming pressure from public opinion and being held accountable by Chiang Kai-shek, Song Se-ven was forced to resign bitterly as premier in March 1947, officially putting an end to all technocratic reform efforts. Although investigative bodies under Chiang Ching-kuo, Chiang Kai-shek's son, subsequently launched an inquiry into Kung-Lingkan's companies for speculative crimes sabotaging the economy. The investigation was smothered under the direct protection and intervention of Song Mei-ling, allowing the Kung faction to escape completely scot-free. Song Se-ven's policies had been warped into a large-scale asset confiscation tool, driving national capitalists and the urban middle class to bankruptcy. The destruction of private manufacturing caused the supply of goods to collapse, which, combined with the complete burning through of national gold reserves, threw open the gates to the most terrifying period of hyperinflation in history. The Fabi currency entered a freefall of depreciation. In less than a decade, Fabi transformed into the most horrifying hyperinflationary storm in Far Eastern history. In 1937, 100 Fabi could still buy an ox. By 1940, that same amount could only buy a pig. In 1943, it shrunk to just enough for a chicken. In 1945, as the war ended, 100 yuan could buy only a single egg. And by 1948, the residents of Shanghai had to push wheelbarrows piled high with paper banknotes into the streets, just to exchange them for a bag of rice. Paper money lost its value to the extent that using it to kindle a stove was cheaper than buying firewood. Citizens and merchants turned their backs on paper money en masse, leaving the financial market in a state of paralysis. The government was forced to kill off the Fabi currency. The climax of the collapse came in August 1948, when the government executed a currency reform, issuing the gold yuan certificates. The government issued a decree compelling the entire population to hand over all accumulated gold, silver, and foreign exchange, in exchange for newly issued gold yuan notes that had no real backing. While ordinary people suffered the confiscation of their tangible wealth, crony conglomerates of the four great families continued to speculate on daily necessities, manipulating prices behind the scenes. Having collected the entire real wealth of the people, the government continued to print gold yuan recklessly to finance the war. Within a few short months, the gold yuan lost all value, turning into useless paper scrap. The entire lifetime savings and assets of the middle class and urban poor were wiped out. The consumer price index surged by millions of times. The collapse of the financial market dragged down the commercial system, leaving production dead in its tracks. This economic collapse utterly extinguished the final drop of public confidence in the nationalist government. When soldiers on the battlefield received their pay in stacks of worthless paper that could not buy food for their families, military defeat in 1949 became entirely inevitable. Yet, the tragedy of mainland China during these dying years lay not merely in inflation figures or empty treasuries. It was also vividly captured through the fate of a person who had once been the most brilliant, powerful, and admired symbol of the regime. First Lady Song Mei-ling. As the political and economic system erected by her family entered its final hours on the edge of the abyss, the diplomatic glamour that had once spellbound the entire Western world faded away amidst the gathering storm of the era. Part 12. The pinnacle of power, global glamour of the four great families, and the icon of Song Mei-ling. Before plunging into the mire of collapse and hollowed out by civil war, inflation, and corruption, the four great families had once elevated the regime to the peak of supreme power, capturing unprecedented global glamour on the world's political and diplomatic chessboard. The first turning point, shaping the international standing of the Song family, occurred immediately following the Pearl Harbor attack on the 7th of December 1941, when the United States officially declared war on Japan and the Pacific War erupted full scale. At that juncture, Chiang Kai-shek had officially appointed Song Se-ven as Minister of Foreign Affairs of the Republic of China, replacing Guo Tai-chi. From this point, Song Se-ven immediately stepped onto the global political stage as the vital lifelink between China and the Allied coalition comprising the United States, Great Britain, and the Soviet Union. Through tireless engagement and coordination efforts, he negotiated directly with President Franklin D. Roosevelt and Prime Minister Winston Churchill, successfully raising China's status from a carved-up, war-torn nation to one of the Big Four Allied powers, standing shoulder to shoulder with the world's superpowers of the era. The pinnacle of Song Se-ven's diplomatic career extended into 1945 with milestones of historic global proportions. In April 1945, he led the Chinese delegation to the San Francisco Conference, personally signing the United Nations Charter on behalf of the nation, thereby making China one of the first 5 permanent members of the United Nations Security Council, holding the supreme power of veto. Not stopping there, in June 1945, Song Se-ven concurrently assumed the premiership and personally undertook a turbulent diplomatic mission to Moscow to negotiate directly with Soviet leader Joseph Stalin, concluding with the signing of the 1945 Sino-Soviet Treaty of Friendship and Alliance. These brilliant milestones brought the diplomatic and legal power of the four great families on the international stage to a height of glory unprecedented in modern Chinese history. In parallel with Song Se-ven's macroeconomic diplomatic victories, Kung-Soong also reached the summit of international prestige in July 1944, when he represented one of the 44 Allied nations gathering at the United Nations Monetary and Financial Conference in Bretton Woods, New Hampshire, to establish the post-war world economic order. In his capacity as Minister of Finance and Vice Premier, Kung-Soong proudly led the Chinese delegation at the conference. There, he put pen to paper to help birth the International Monetary Fund and the World Bank, placing China among the foundational pillars shaping the global monetary system. At the time, the West treated Kung-Soong as a financial architect of Asian stature, reflecting the absolute political power he had held for over a decade. However, that very same year, in 1944, with the scandal surrounding the profiteering from the $500 million US aid package, Kung-Soong's embezzlement of resources was exposed, igniting a wave of fierce outrage among the public and leaving Washington utterly disillusioned. Parallel to her brother's macroeconomic advances on the international stage, Song Mei-ling built robust soft power, domestically through social campaigns and political crisis management. In her youth, she studied in the United States alongside her sisters, graduating from the prestigious Wellesley College in 1917. Those school-era connections, combined with her deep understanding of both American and Chinese cultures, served as the core foundation enabling her to achieve great deeds. After marrying Chiang Kai-shek in late 1927, when her husband rose to commander-in-chief and leader of the Kuomintang, she acted as his English interpreter, secretary, and advisor, employing her full knowledge and vision to aid her husband's political path. Upon becoming First Lady, she began leveraging her old network of acquaintances in the United States, combining it with Western politicians and media to turn it into a sharp political instrument. She helped Chiang Kai-shek forge the image of a Chinese leader pursuing modernization and embracing Christianity so as to win the favor of both the U.S. government and the American public. From the mid-1930s, as war with Japan loomed, Mei-ling officially entered the iron world of combat power. She was trusted by Chiang Kai-shek to assume the post of Secretary General of the Aeronautical Affairs Commission under the National Military Council, holding direct authority to operate and reconstruct the Republic of China Air Force. She was the primary force negotiating the procurement of fighter aircraft from the West and recruiting foreign volunteer pilots, most notably the legendary Flying Tigers Squadron under General Claire Lee Chennault. Beneath the guise of an aristocratic woman, she was, in fact, the underground commander-in-chief of the Chinese skies at the time. In 1934, alongside Chiang Kai-shek, she launched the New Life movement in Nanjing to impose Confucian moral standards combined with modern military discipline onto the daily lives of the populace. Under Mei-ling's hand, this movement controlled not only living etiquette, public sanitation, and social order, but also deftly helped the Nanjing authorities build the image of a reformed China to win the support of Western political and religious circles. Mei-ling's iron resolve and supreme prestige were tested through the most perilous turns of history. In December 1936, the Xi'an incident broke out when Chiang Kai-shek was detained by two subordinate generals, Zhang Xueliang and Yang Hucheng, to force a suspension of the civil war with the Communist Party and form a united front against Japan. Amidst the chaos in Nanjing, with the Kuomintang Hawk faction furiously preparing to flatten Xi'an in a sea of fire, Mei-ling intervened. She courageously flew straight into the rebels' den alone, risking her life to save her husband. That life-or-death decision was backed by a discreet connection. Mei-ling and Zhang Xueliang shared a long-standing personal relationship and close friendship, a bond transcending political enmities. Within high society at the time, they had many opportunities to interact, sharing interests in art, modern lifestyles, and anxieties over the national state of affairs. It was precisely this special bond and unspoken trust that allowed her to arrive not as a cold negotiator, but as a confidant staking her very life on a wake-up call. Through sharp wisdom, firm gaze, and empathetic language, she successfully persuaded Zhang Xueliang to release Chiang Kai-shek. Not stopping there, Zhang Xueliang personally escorted Chiang Kai-shek and his wife back to Nanjing. This laid the foundation for the temporary ceasefire between the nationalists and communists to fight fascism. The event elevated Mei-ling's prestige to its zenith, establishing her as the irreplaceable supreme advisor alongside Chiang Kai-shek. Later, when the Hawk faction and Chiang Kai-shek himself flew into a rage, demanding Zhang Xueliang's execution, it was Mei-ling who stood as a living shield, using her entire prestige and political life to fiercely block the way. firmly protecting and preserving the life of her close friend. The most brilliant pinnacle of her political career occurred in early 1943 with a sensational diplomatic tour across the United States. Far beyond a mere diplomatic campaign, from side events to public speeches, she skillfully emphasized her deep Christian faith and that of her family. This spiritual alignment allowed her to connect directly and deeply with the middle class and devout politicians in the US East, transforming China's war of resistance into a spiritual cause. She elevated the conflict not merely to defend territory, but positioned China as a resilient outpost, safeguarding America's own democratic and freedom values in Asia. From there, she articulated with sharp logic that American aid to China was by no means a favor, but a shared duty and responsibility of the entire free world. Before that, through her strategic vision and extensive personal network, Mei-ling had used her close ties with former officer Claire Lee Chennault to lobby the American political establishment to form a volunteer air force, laying the first stones for the legendary Flying Tigers Squadron to help China fight the Japanese Air Force. Even before the US officially entered the war following the Pearl Harbor attack, as only the second Chinese woman and the first foreigner in history to be honored to address a joint session of the US Congress, she completely mesmerized the Western media and political establishment. With her flawless English, aristocratic demeanor, and emotionally charged speeches calling for aid against Japan. With a language that was sharp, vivid, deeply emotional, and poetic, she transformed China's harrowing war of resistance against Japanese fascism into a sacred mission to defend all of human civilization from the peril of extinction. The entire hall of the US Congress plunged into absolute silence before erupting in emotion. Her speech brought all US legislators to their feet in a standing ovation, generating an unprecedented wave of public support for China across the United States. That historic diplomatic tour truly delivered massive political impacts on every front. Militarily and humanitarianly, she pushed the US Congress to accelerate the emergency transport of weaponry to the Chinese front via the most perilous air corridor in history, known as the Himalayan route, or the Hump, and attracted tens of millions of dollars in voluntary donations from civic organizations and the American Red Cross to relieve millions of starving war victims in China. Legislatively, the immense public pressure stemming from her trip compelled President Franklin D. Roosevelt to sign the Magnuson Act in December 1943, officially repealing the Chinese Exclusion Act, which had maintained heavy racial discrimination on American soil for over 60 years, effectively ending the ban on Chinese immigration and allowing them to naturalize as US citizens, thereby elevating the international prestige of the Nanjing government to its absolute zenith. Her resounding success in the US helped the Kuomintang government secure its status as one of the post-war world's 4 policemen, alongside the US, Britain, and the Soviet Union, while completely crushing any skeptical voices from domestic opposition factions or local warlords regarding Chiang Kai-shek's leadership capacity, cementing the undisputed dominance of the Kung-Soong power couple. Mei-ling's resounding success on American soil stemmed not only from her own exceptional talent, but also thanks to a massive media launchpad standing behind her. That launchpad was the powerful man named Henry Luce, the pioneering tycoon of the prestigious Time magazine. Born in China, Henry Luce held a fervent belief that the Kung-Soong couple were the only ones capable of saving China and steering it onto a pro-American path of modernization. Henry Luce and his wife had long maintained a close relationship. Regarding Sung Mei-ling as a confidant, he turned his publications into a potent propaganda tool, paving the way for the Chinese First Lady's introduction to the Western public. Immediately following that sensational speech, her aristocratic image appeared on the cover of the prestigious Time magazine. Through her innate talent and undeniable personal magnetism, Song Mei-ling captivated and touched the hearts of millions of Americans, securing colossal military and financial aid commitments, while lifting her political prestige to its most dazzling height on the world stage. Such immense influence was so profound that Chiang Kai-shek once proudly declared to Western advisers, "My wife alone in Washington possesses a value equivalent to 10 military divisions." Even President Roosevelt at the time had to concede that the Chinese First Lady was an extraordinary diplomat, yet one who was equally sharp and utterly formidable at the negotiating table. Behind the scenes of this diplomatic war, she coordinated closely with her brother, Song Tse-ven, on the international, diplomatic and financial front. This seamless synergy created an exceptionally sharp operational axis, while Song Mei-ling employed her personal magnetism to lobby and capture the hearts of the Western public. Song Tse-ven stood behind her to conduct high-level, nerve-wracking negotiations with Allied leaders, turning those efforts into actual flows of cash and military hardware pouring onto the Chinese battlefield. That global appeal continued to elevate Song Mei-ling to the supreme diplomatic stage at the Cairo Conference in Egypt in November 1943, positioned amidst the world's most powerful trio, Franklin D. Roosevelt of the United States, Winston Churchill of Great Britain, and Chiang Kai-shek. Song Mei-ling did not appear merely as an accompanying wife. She was the primary diplomat, the core brain, and the true spokesperson of the Chinese delegation. Winston Churchill, famously pragmatic, had previously held a less than favorable view of China. Yet faced with Song Mei-ling's sharpness, diplomacy, and native-level fluency in English, Churchill was forced to undergo a complete shift in attitude. She sat properly at the negotiation table, debating as an equal with the world's supreme leaders, commanding the deep respect of both Roosevelt and Churchill, and enabling China to hold its head high at the table of global superpowers. And yet, it was precisely the dazzling aura and immense expectations that Song Mei-ling had painstakingly built that harbored a tragic trap for the regime. The glamour, civilization and democracy she painted before the Western public stood in total, stark contradiction with the harsh reality on the mainland, where monopoly crony capitalism, systemic corruption, and the suppression of democratic freedoms operated by the apparatus of Song Tse-ven and Kung He-xiang-shi were devouring the nation from within. By raising such grand expectations of a democratic China, Song Mei-ling left the U.S. government and Western public in utter disillusionment between 1946 and 1949, when observers witnessed with their own eyes the colossal influx of U.S. aid money, instead of being used to rebuild manufacturing or relieve famine, siphoned into the backdoor companies of the Song and Kung families, or used to fuel speculation and hoarding. The United States gradually turned its back. When the war against Japan ended, rather than entering an era of peace and reconstruction, the nationalist government plunged back into civil war with the Communist Party under the weight of hyperinflation, the 1948 gold yuan catastrophe, and total economic breakdown. Public trust in the Kuomintang vanished completely. Chiang Kai-shek was forced to dispatch Song Mei-ling on an emergency mission to the United States in late 1948, to plead for direct military and financial aid from President Harry S. Truman. However, this trip ended in complete failure. Washington had by then lost all faith in the Nanjing government following shocking corruption scandals. President Truman coldly refused relief, concluding that any money or weaponry pumped into the region would merely disappear into the bottomless pit of the great families. The unraveling of that glamorous diplomatic veil pushed the Kuomintang regime into total isolation on the international stage, directly hastening the complete economic and military disaster of 1949. The fate of the four great families and the Nanjing government was now numbered in mere days. Part 13. The collapse of the Kuomintang and the fate of the four great families. In 1949, the final chapter of Chiang Kai-shek's reign on the mainland officially drew its curtain as military defense lines collapsed like dominoes before the storm-like advance of the People's Liberation Army. One of the largest evacuations in Chinese history entered its fiercest stage. Yet, this was no chaotic, aimless retreat. From late 1948, realizing that the mainland situation was beyond salvation, Chiang Kai-shek had secretly devised a strategic evacuation plan to the island of Taiwan, a sanctuary shielded by the natural barrier of the strait and the infrastructure left behind by the Japanese. To prepare for the revival in the new land, Chiang Kai-shek decided to take along the absolute essence and core of the nation under the strict confidentiality of the Secret Service. Nearly 4 million taels of gold, over 100 tons, representing the entire treasure reserve of the central bank, along with thousands of crates of priceless artifacts from the Forbidden City, were loaded onto ships, clearing the way for Taiwan. This massive wealth was the vital lifeline, helping Chiang stabilize the Taiwanese economy and nurture the dream of reclaiming the mainland later on. Accompanying the treasure was a sensational exodus of over 2 million people. They included generals, Kuomintang elders, elite intellectuals, artists, and tens of thousands of defeated soldiers. On the 10th of December 1949, the special aircraft carrying Chiang Kai-shek and his son took off from Chengdu, heading towards Taipei. Turning his head to look back at the mainland one last time, Chiang Kai-shek could never have guessed that he would never be able to return to this place ever again. The Great Flight of 1949 also marked the definitive end of the four great families' dominance on the mainland. This family rule power structure, placing clan interests above national interests, ultimately sowed the seeds for complete collapse on the mainland in 1949. When the cloak of power was torn apart, each family faced a bitter fate of dispersion and separation. The Chen family, Chen Guofu and Chen Lifu, became the greatest tragedy among the clans. In the power structure of the four great families, if the Chiang family held military power through martial strength, and the Song and Kung families held a monopoly over finance and international diplomacy, then the Chen brothers, along with the power of the CC clique, held party power and supreme ideological control. Although not directly managing the nation's financial lifeblood or state banking system like Song Tseven or Kung Xiangxi, the Chen family still constructed a distinct economic empire. They utilized the public administrative apparatus and the Central Bureau of Investigation and Statistics, Zhongtong, secret service network controlled by Chen Lifu, as a protective shield for their faction's speculative activities, establishing crony economic privileges while ruthlessly suppressing and suffocating any independent competitors. Unlike the prosperous Shanghai of the Song family, the Chen family established an economic monopoly through control over rural life and agricultural resources. The CC clique pushed heavily for the creation of agricultural cooperatives in rural areas. Nominally, these were tools to support farmers. But in reality, the Chen family used this system to purchase agricultural produce, particularly rice, cotton, and silk, at dirt-cheap prices, subsequently monopolizing distribution and hoarding goods to sell at inflated prices in urban centers. In the post-World War II period, when Song Che-ven's position wavered due to the economic crisis, Chen Guofu extended his tentacles to capture the chairmanship of the board of directors at the Agricultural Bank of China. Controlling this bank enabled Chen family to capture all agricultural credit capital, choking independent rural capitalists and maximizing profits for the CC clique's crony capital. Particularly during the hyperinflation phase of the late 1940s, taking advantage of the Zhongtong Secret Service network deeply rooted in local areas. The Chen family seized confidential intelligence on supply and demand to sweep up and speculate on daily necessities, directly accumulating a massive family fortune on the blood and sweat of the people. This bureaucratic greed of the Chen family sparked a deep, suffocating factional conflict with the technocratic financial faction of the Sung and Kung families. During the hyperinflation crisis of 1947, as the Fabi currencies collapsed, the CC clique, alongside the reform movement of young party members, launched a brutal media campaign directly attacking Sung Se-ven, accusing him of abuse of power and corruption. When overwhelming pressure forced Song Se-ven to resign, the Chen family's CC clique immediately filled the vacated economic power vacuums, maximizing their personal influence. However, it was precisely the supreme greed and authoritarian, nepotistic rule of the Chen family that turned them into the greatest tragedy among the clans. The ruthless suppression and strangulation of freedom by the Zhongtong Secret Service drove intellectuals, students, the middle class, and progressive thinkers away from the Kuomintang into the arms of the opposition. This, combined with internal corruption, division, and fierce intelligence battles with the Military Bureau of Investigation and Statistics, Zhongtong severely weakened the Kuomintang's defensive system. Consequently, this network was easily penetrated by brilliant underground agents of the Communist Party, leading to the leakage of numerous top-secret military documents before hitting the front lines. Following the catastrophic defeat in 1949, Chiang Kai-shek shifted total blame onto the corruption of this bureaucratic system, moving to strip all political power from the Chen brothers and placing the entire intelligence and security apparatus under his son, Chiang Ching-kuo, for reconstruction. The elder brother, Chen Guofu, was politically isolated, stripped of all actual power within the party organization, and died in poverty and illness in 1951 in Taipei. Meanwhile, the younger brother, Chen Lifu, was forced to flee politics and go into political exile in the United States, where he had to run a chicken farm in New Jersey to make a living day by day before being allowed to return to Taiwan many years later as a cultural scholar devoid of power. Unlike the bitter end of the Chen family, the Kung-Soong families chose a pragmatic and exceptionally wealthy way out. The transfer of their assets to the United States did not happen abruptly in 1949, but was the result of long-term preparation spanning the Sino-Japanese War and the Civil War. Before officially fleeing to the United States, the Kung and Soong families had painstakingly built a massive capitalist foundation on the mainland based on monopoly crony capitalism and corruption. converting national assets into private family holdings and crony alliances. Their destruction of the native national bourgeoisie and abuse of the exclusive money-printing press were the fatal seeds that pushed the economy into the hyperinflationary disaster of the late 1940s. When independent capitalists were eliminated, the room for free market development vanished. The National Economic Foundation completely lost its ability to self-regulate and withstand financial shocks. Realizing the mainland was beyond saving, the two families continuously siphoned assets to Wall Street banks in New York in the form of personal accounts, anonymous accounts, or through complex offshore trusts to bypass the control of both the Republic of China government and U.S. tax and audit agencies. At the same time, they poured heavy capital into Wall Street stocks, oil conglomerates, major banks, and purchased luxury real estate, such as mansion estates in Long Island, New York. Kung-Soong and Song-7 chose the United States as their permanent sanctuary to avoid having their assets confiscated by Chiang Kai-shek. In the United States, they lived out their final years wrapped in silk and ultimate luxury inside multi-million-dollar mansions, standing completely outside the whirlpool of political disputes. The departure of the Kung and Song families and the sidelining of the Chen family officially brought an end to the era of manipulation by the three great clans on the mainland. And yet, the historic hand played by the Chiang family did not stop there. On the island of Taiwan, Chiang Kai-shek still held the seat of supreme power and initiated a reform plan to rectify the previous mistakes on the mainland. This opened a new historical chapter, thorny yet no less miraculous, for the island. And it was also from that fateful 1949 exodus that another tragedy, more painful and more human, began to quietly consume the women of the Song family. The permanent separation with no reunion for the two sisters, Song Mei-ling and Song Ching-ling, which we will recount in the latter part of this video. Please stay tuned. Part 14. The Chiang family and the miracle in Taiwan. The catastrophic defeat on the mainland was a harsh bucket of cold water thrown directly at Chiang Kai-shek's self-esteem. He bitterly admitted to three fatal mistakes on the mainland: loosening discipline to allow rampant corruption, condoning crony capitalist conglomerates to manipulate the economy, and abandoning the nation's lifeblood, the poor farmers. The Chiang family understood that if they did not correct these mistakes, the island of Taiwan would become the next grave for the Kuomintang. Chiang Kai-shek established the Central Reform Committee, ruthlessly expelling corrupt party members, stripping all political power from the Chen brothers, and handing the entire intelligence and security system over to his son, Chiang Ching-kuo, to rebuild. Alongside the internal purge, Chiang Ching-kuo consolidated all intelligence forces into a single nexus under the National Security Bureau for centralized control. At the Ministry of National Defense, he planted a tight surveillance network to completely eliminate any coup intentions. This apparatus enforced the martial law decree, ushering in the White Terror era that lasted for decades. They strictly controlled the press and ideology, relentlessly hunted down underground Chinese Communist Party agents trailing from the mainland, and forcefully suppressed the native Taiwanese independence movement to keep the island from fracturing due to deep ethnic conflicts. The father and son of the Chiang family deftly used this political stability as a launchpad for macroeconomic development. From 1949 to 1953, the Chiang's regime executed a peaceful land reform known as land to the tiller. The Kuomintang deployed a three-step strategy under the guidance of American expert Wolf Ladajinski. The first step was curbing the greed of landlords in 1949. Previously, farmers were brutally exploited, forced to surrender up to 70% of their yield to landowners. The new law forced landlords to charge a maximum of only 37.5%, and even less during years of natural disasters and crop failures, thereby helping farmers instantly increase their income, gain extra capital for fertilizers and tools, and build motivation to boost output. The second step was granting ownership opportunities to farmers in 1951. The government confiscated all old land previously held by the Japanese colonizers and resold it to poor farmers at low prices. To protect the poor from the storm of inflation, the government allowed them to pay in installments over 10 years, using actual agricultural produce, such as rice or sweet potatoes, instead of cash. The final step was the decisive strike in 1953 to wipe out the old landlord class. The government enacted a law prohibiting any landlord from owning more than 3 hectares of land. Excess land was bought back by the government, then subdivided to be sold on installments to poor, landless farmers. The genius stroke lay in how the government paid the landlords for the land. To avoid printing excessive cash that would spark hyperinflation, the government compensated them with equivalent value divided into 2 parts. 70% in agricultural bonds backed by rice and sweet potatoes to prevent depreciation, and 30% in stock shares of 4 major state-owned industrial conglomerates, comprising cement, paper, forestry, and mining. After having most of their ancestral land stripped away and receiving stock certificates in return, the fates of more than 100,000 Taiwanese landlords split into 2 polar opposite extremes. For small and medium landlords, accustomed to traditional land rent lifestyles, they were completely blind to the stock financial market. Fearing inflation and harboring distrust towards the newly arrived Kuomintang administration from the mainland, they believed these stock shares were mere useless paper. Thus, in a panic, they rushed onto the open market, dumping their shares at dirt-cheap prices to gather whatever little cash they could. As a result, the steady income from land rent vanished. Their panic-sold money gradually evaporated, and they swiftly plunged into the urban poor class, or had to return as hired labor in factories. In total contrast, ultra-large landlord clans, highly educated and sharp to the times, leveraged this opportunity to execute a spectacular class transition. They bought up all the shares dumped by small landlords and seized board control of the 4 giant state enterprises that had just been privatized. Most typical was the Ku family of Lukang. Mr. Ku Chenfu used his compensation shares and financial prowess to take over Taiwan Cement Corporation, turning it into a launchpad to build the Kus Group, one of Taiwan's most powerful financial, banking and industrial empires to this day. Similarly, other major clans, such as the Lin family of Banqiao and the Lin family of Wu Feng, successfully shifted their entire wealth from agriculture to urban real estate, banking, and global trade. This land for-stock mechanism executed a natural selection within the Taiwanese elite class. It broke the outdated rural feudal structure, impoverished conservative landlords, yet birthed a new generation of industrial and commercial magnates. The very people who would directly pull the Taiwanese economic train to become one of the Asian tigers during the 1970s and 1980s. This landmark reform yielded historical sweet fruit, fundamentally transforming the destiny of Taiwan. For the farmers, once they became masters of their own land, they actively intensified cultivation, creating a colossal food surplus that helped accumulate capital for the nation. Simultaneously, the application of modern machinery and fertilizers in production liberated farm labor, freeing a massive force of young rural workers from being tied to the fields. They flooded into major urban areas, becoming the core worker force for the exploding modern industrial factories. From a carpetbagger regime viewed with deep suspicion by the native population, the Kuomintang secured the absolute support of the peasant majority. The reform dissolved the old landlord class, who tended to be pro-Japanese or held opposing political voices, making it easy for the Kuomintang to maintain social stability during the martial law period. The reform laid the foundational stone for an egalitarian society. Taiwan became one of the rare economies to achieve lightning-fast growth while keeping the wealth gap extremely low. The fair redistribution of land gave birth to a vast, affluent, and educated middle class. It was precisely this middle class that became the sturdiest bedrock keeping society from falling into chaos, paving the way for a peaceful transition into a modern democracy decades later. Under the practical stewardship of Chiang Kuo, who by then held complete executive power in Taiwan on behalf of his father. The political stability forged by the older generation was utilized as a launchpad for macroeconomic development. He constructed a technocratic government where truly brilliant economic experts were valued and employed. Under his leadership, Taiwan poured all its strength into the 10 major construction projects. From an impoverished agricultural island-spanning expressways, modern seaports, massive steel mills and oil refineries rose one after another, generating a historic momentum that propelled Taiwan to become one of the 4 Asian tigers and, later, a global semiconductor technology hub. Yet, Chiang Kuo's greatest legacy did not stop at economic growth figures. In his final years, facing the changing times, in 1987, Chiang Kuo officially announced the lifting of the 38-year-long martial law decree, opening the door to press freedom, allowing the formation of opposition political parties, and unshackling Taiwanese democracy. Taiwan underwent a peaceful transformation from an authoritarian regime into a modern democracy. He left behind a famous saying deeply carved into the minds of the people. "I am Taiwanese," an affirmation that the Chiang family were no longer foreign rulers arriving from afar, but had merged as one with this land. Chiang Kuo saved a Kuomintang on the brink of despair by returning power to the people, turning Taiwan into a resilient entity that could not be struck down, closing a turbulent chapter of history, and bringing a complete end to the era of the 4 great families. Part 15. The permanent separation, never to meet again, of the 2 Sung sisters, Sung Ching-ling and Sung Mei-ling. As the velvet curtain of history gradually fell upon the 4 once illustrious families, a smoldering wound remained, the most painful family tragedy of the 20th century. The permanent separation, never to meet again, of the 2 Sung sisters, Sung Ching-ling and Sung Mei-ling. Once the most brilliant and proudest flowers of the Sung clan, they chose 2 completely opposing paths, unwittingly pushing each other to opposite ends of the battle lines. Song Mei-ling accompanied her husband across the sea to Taiwan, retaining her status as First Lady of the Republic of China. On the other side of the strait, Sung Ching-ling chose to remain on the mainland to devote all her strength to building the People's Republic of China. In her homeland, Song Ching-ling rose to the summit of power, successively holding supreme posts such as Vice President of the State. president of the Sino-Soviet Friendship Association, and honorary president of the All China Women's Federation. Her published anthology, The Struggle for New China, moved millions of hearts, earning her the prestigious Stalin Peace Prize. During the tumultuous period from 1968 to 1972, she even stepped forward to serve as co-head of state. Mei-ling had wanted to heal family ties on many occasions, yet she could not abandon her position alongside Chiang Kai-shek. Meanwhile, Ching-ling could not betray the ideals she believed in. For over 3 decades, 2 women who shared the same bloodline and slept under the same roof could only see each other through cold wartime news dispatches. They were like 2 people standing on different boats amidst a storm of history. On the 16th of May 1981, just 2 weeks before drawing her final breath, Ching-ling was admitted into the Chinese Communist Party and conferred the highest honorific title, Honorary President of the People's Republic of China, a status unique in the nation's history. Yet, as she lay on her deathbed in Beijing, her final wish was neither for fame nor power, but simply to hold her younger sister Mei-ling's hand one last time. The Beijing government issued an urgent invitation through diplomatic channels, ready to arrange a special flight to bring Mei-ling back. But the reply from Taipei was nothing but silence. Mei-ling, for the sake of the Chiang family's political cause, the dignity of the Kuomintang, and the invisible barriers of history, chose to refuse. Ching-ling closed her eyes forever in utter solitude, carrying the unfinished promises of their childhood into the dust. 22 years later, in 2003, in an ancient apartment in New York, Mei-ling drew her final breath at the age of 105. It is said that during her lonely final years in a foreign land, her most precious possession was neither sparkling diamonds nor noble cheongsams, but an old family photo album yellowed by time. She would often sit in silence for hours on end, her frail fingers caressing the face of her elder sister Ching-ling in a childhood photograph, late tears softly rolling down her weathered cheeks. The 2 great daughters of the Sung family, 2 women who used their beauty, intellect, and influence to turn the tide of a nation's history, ultimately suffered fate's most cruel separation. They may have conquered the chessboard of power, holding the most unique titles of the era, yet they suffered total defeat before the bonds of blood. That permanent separation, with no reunion, left behind an echoing silence of regret, carrying a heart-wrenching, yearning down into the deep grave and officially drawing the curtain on the final tear-stained chapter of the 4 great families.